Chapter 1105. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. It was a quiet night. Inside the quiet palace, two shadows were elongated under the moonlight, and the air was accompanied by the sound of heavy breathing. "Can you stay? I'm willing to give you this world." At that moment, Yun-Yi looked at Yi Chen in a daze. There were tears in her clear eyes. Perhaps it was because she had drunk a glass of wine, but her enchanting face was half flushed. She felt a little hot. She could not suppress the urge in her heart. She was even more aware that if the words she'd spoken earlier were to spread, it would definitely cause the entire world to be shaken. No matter what, she was still the Empress Dowager of the current dynasty. She was the late Emperor's woman in name, even though she had never been taken advantage of. However, she could not care less, because she knew that the man in front of her would leave after daybreak, and this farewell was likely to be permanent. If she did not seize the opportunity to say it now, she might not have the chance to say it in this lifetime. Despite Yi Chen's determination, his heart could not help but waver when he heard such direct words. Furthermore, the wine he had drunk earlier had some condiments added to it, causing him to be unable to react in time. Immediately after, an intoxicating scent of a young lady filled his nose, causing him to be instantly jolted awake. Yi Chen waved his sleeve and pushed the beauty who was approaching him a few steps back. He then said, "Ms. Yun, I think you're drunk." "Drunk?" After Yun-Yi stabilized herself, she laughed self-deprecatingly. "Perhaps, but only when I'm drunk will I have the courage to tell you the truth. I'm the daughter of the Han Hai King. I thought I was in control of my marriage." She looked at Yi Chen quietly and bit her red lips. She took a deep breath in and said, "However, I was played by fate. I was sent to the Yao court and was taken as a concubine by the dying late emperor. Later on, I became the Empress Dowager at the age of 20. Yi Chen said nothing, but he secretly sighed. If Yun-Yi was on Earth at her age, she might still be in university. She was a girl without any social experience. However, in the ancient desolate realm, what she had experienced and borne far exceeded women of her age. I thought that I would protect the sect for the rest of my life until I died of old age because of the late emperor's wishes." Yun-Yi's eyes were red. She looked at Yi Chen with tears in her eyes. "But God let me meet you. The first time I saw you, your long white hair made me feel that you have experiences beyond your youthful appearance. As for your gaze, it's deep and mysterious. I didn't even dare to take a second look at it before." Her nose twitched slightly as she spoke to this point. She looked at Yi Chen with her beautiful eyes shining. "I really hope that you can leave everything behind and stay." Yi Chen saw the gentleness and tenderness that only a young lady had when he met her gaze. It gave one the urge to protect her uncontrollably. He shook his head slightly and said, "I'm sorry. I've said it from the beginning. A sect isn't where I belong. I have a wife, parents, and friends." As soon as these words came out, Yun-Yi felt a stabbing pain in her heart for no reason. Her slightly expectant eyes dimmed. Even though she had vaguely guessed Yi Chen's determination, it was still difficult for her to accept and give up after hearing it. Thinking to this point, she wiped her tears and forcefully suppressed the sadness in her heart. "Then, can you bring me along?" "No," Yi Chen said almost ruthlessly. It was undeniable that the weakness that came from Yun-Yi's bones made him have the urge to protect her. However, his rationality told him that he and Yun-Yi were people from two different worlds. The palace fell into a short silence. Yi Chen said after a long time, "It's late. Rest early." After saying that, he slowly disappeared from the palace without waiting for the former to speak, leaving the beautiful woman standing in the same place alone with a sad expression. Yi Chen found Meng Meng, who was being fed all sorts of delicacies by Lu Fei in the pantry. The little girl's stomach was round. "All right, go back with Daddy. We're leaving tomorrow." Yi Chen picked her up, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The little girl burped and wiped the remaining pastry crumbs at the corner of her mouth on Yi Chen. She waved at Lu Fei. "Goodbye, Sister Lu Fei." "Goodbye, Meng Meng." Lu Fei snickered immediately. After watching the father and daughter leave, she looked in the direction of Changel Palace and sighed softly. Clearly, even she could feel that the relationship between Mr. Yi and Empress Dowager Yun Yi was not ordinary. The next morning, Yi Chen picked up the little girl who had washed up and rushed to the wormhole that he had found earlier. When he passed by a relay station on the way, a group of cavalry came over. The leader was Lu Fei. Mr. Yi, the Empress Dowager asked me to give you something. Yi Chen took it and took a look. He realized that it was a storage bag with close to 10,000 spirit stones in it. There was also an exquisite perfume pouch that a woman used with the word E carved on it. She's thoughtful. Yi Chen sighed softly. He could not help but recall what happened last night. Lu Fei said hesitantly, the Empress Dowager also said that she hopes that you can still remember her face after a few years. All right. Yi Chen nodded lightly and continued walking towards the main road while carrying the little girl. Lu Fei watched the father and daughter disappear completely before returning to the imperial city with the cavalry. At the peak of the imperial city, a cold woman stood alone. She looked into the sky, and a complicated expression appeared in her beautiful eyes. Lu Fei appeared quietly. Empress Dowager, he's gone. In this world, there will be separation when things come together. If there's love, why should I be afraid of separation? 10 years of life and death are boundless. If I don't think about it, it'll be unforgettable, Yun Yi mumbled to herself. The scenes of her meeting Yi Chen kept appearing in her mind. All of this seemed like a dream. As the saying went, time passed quickly and things changed. This was how the world should be. Lu Fei said nothing. After an unknown period of time, a faint voice rang in her ears. The wind is blowing. Let's go back. On the 5th day after Yi Chen left, the internal rebellion in the imperial city was completely quelled. A month later, Yun Yi personally led the army and fought the 800,000 troops of the Qing kingdom at the border with less than 500,000 troops. The Qing kingdom was defeated, and military advisor Gu Jianqiu's injuries flared up and he died on the battlefield. The Qing kingdom had no choice but to retreat 3,000 li and make an agreement with the major sects never to offend each other. At that time, Yun Yi's prestige in the major sects was at its peak, and she won the hearts of the people. The hidden dangers in the court broke out, and many ministers, under the guise of protecting the emperor, tried to force the Empress Dowager to return her power. Internal strife broke out in the palace, which was then suppressed by Yun Yi. Countless heads rolled to the ground, and the little Emperor Lu Chengqian suddenly died. Yun Yi proclaimed herself the Empress and took control of the Daizong dynasty as the Empress. She ruled over the world and changed the dynasty, changing the name of the Daizong dynasty into the Great Qin dynasty. Since then, all the new palace maids and eunuchs had a question in their hearts, and that was the statue erected in the middle of the palace. The statue seemed to be of a man with a head of white hair. His eyes were deep and his expression was cold, as if he wanted to look down on the gods of the world. Whenever the Empress Dowager had time, she would stand alone in front of the statue for a long time, until late at night. Many people were discussing this in private. Some said that the man in the statue was the Empress's elder brother, while others said that the man in the statue was the Empress's first love. If you like Evildoer Daddy in the City, please collect. Evildoer Daddy in the City. Chapter 1106. Ancient, desolate realm, Tianfeng Sea area. On a remote island, the waves were crashing crazily against the reefs on the shore, and groups of seagulls were soaring high in the sky. However, this natural scenery was broken at this moment. The entire island trembled slightly, and a resplendent yellow light suddenly appeared in the southeast corner of the island. As the yellow light dissipated, a thin figure carrying a little girl appeared out of thin air under a huge reef. Have we arrived? After Yi Chen stabilized himself, he lifted his eyes and looked around while carrying Meng Meng. He realized that he was on a huge island. As far as the eye could see, there was a boundless sea in the distance, and it was filled with endless blue water. The little girl in his arms blinked her black eyes and said, Daddy, where are we? This. Daddy wants to know too. Yi Chen looked awkward immediately. At the same time, he felt a little regretful. He should have asked for a complete map of the Tianfeng Sea area from the White Jade capital before he passed through the wormhole. However, looking at the endless sea before him, he could still guess that he had indeed arrived at the Tianfeng Sea area. After some thought, he finally chose the Tianfeng Sea area between the Eastern Wilderness, Tianfeng Sea area, and Zhongzhou. Right at that moment, a large net suddenly descended from the sky, trapping the father and daughter within it. Squeak, the little girl was shocked. At the same time, an extremely excited voice came from afar. Master, I caught him. I caught him. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 figures rushed over. The leader was a middle-aged man with a one-eyed dragon in a cotton jacket and an eye patch over his left eye. The people behind him were holding steel forks or machetes. All of them looked unruly. Pirates? Yi Chen was slightly stunned. The dozen or so people surrounded Yi Chen and his daughter. The one-eyed dragon who was the leader said in surprise, "Didn't they say that the other party was an old man? Why is it a brat?" "Master, I really don't know about that." A young man who was as skinny as a monkey behind him scratched his head with a confused expression. Could it be that the information was wrong? Wrong my *SS. Someone kicked him and looked at Yi Chen in an unfriendly manner. "I think this brat must be here to take advantage of us. Boss, why don't we?" At this point, his eyes flashed with killing intent. Yi Chen's eyes turned grim. Just when he was going to attack, the one-eyed man suddenly raised his hand. "Wait," the latter stared at Yi Chen fixedly. "Little brother, may I ask who you are? Where are you from?" As he spoke, he carefully sensed the aura on Yi Chen's body, but he realized that he could not sense anything at all. Yi Chen's body shook, and the big net that was wrapped around him was torn into pieces. The scene shocked the rest. Everyone gripped the weapons in their hands tightly and looked at Yi Chen with a murderous intent. The youth who was as skinny as a monkey shouted, "Master, this kid is a martial cultivator." Yi Chen looked around and looked at the one-eyed man. "What is this place?" "Oh my," someone immediately sneered and said to the one-eyed man, "Master, this brat actually turned around and asked us." As soon as he said that, the rest laughed out loud. A hunk walked out while sneering, "Brat, I don't care who you are today, but I can only say that you're unlucky to have fallen into our Black Shark Gang's hands." As soon as he said that, he swung the machete in his hand at Yi Chen. His master stage cultivation base exploded. "You're courting death." A cold gleam flashed through Yi Chen's eyes. The man exploded into a bloody mist instantly. Dead silence filled the place. The pirates, including the one-eyed man, were dumbstruck. They stared at Yi Chen with fear in their eyes. Walala! A few seconds later, the dozen of them threw away the weapons in their hands and knelt before Yi Chen. "Master, spare my life." "Senior, it's a misunderstanding." "It's a misunderstanding." Yi Chen watched everything coldly. He then stretched his neck and said to the one-eyed man, "Can we talk properly now? I didn't know that you'd come to Black Shark Island. Please, please forgive me." The one-eyed man tried his best to remain calm, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. Killing a master and being invisible. The other party must be a martial venerable. "Answer 3 questions for me," Yi Chen said slowly. "Firstly, who are you guys? Secondly, where is this place? Thirdly, why are you trapping me?" The one-eyed man said without hesitation, "I am mortal. We're the Golden Shark Gang sea pirates who live on Golden Shark Island." "This is Golden Shark Island," he stammered. 3 days ago, we heard that a great enemy was coming to destroy Golden Shark Island, so we set up a trap here in advance. I didn't expect that we've misunderstood you, immortal. Golden Shark Gang? Golden Shark Island?" Yi Chen secretly frowned. He was speechless. It turned out that he had taken the blame for someone else. The trap that the pirates set up was set up in a wonderful way. It happened to be set up at the exit of the teleportation. Just as he was about to speak, an anxious voice suddenly came from afar. "Father!" On the surface of the sea, thousands of feet away, there was a ship speeding towards them. Not long after, a woman in black with a ponytail rushed over with a young man. The moment they saw the young man, the dozen or so pirates kneeling on the ground, including the one-eyed man, were overjoyed. It was as if they had seen their savior. When the woman in black approached, she subconsciously wanted to help the one-eyed man up, but she realized that it was extremely difficult. She could not help but turn around and glare at Yi Chen. "Who are you? Why did you make my father kneel on the ground?" "Sister, you're finally here. This brat made us kneel on the ground because of a disagreement." A pirate kneeling on the ground begged for help. Boom! At that moment, the woman attacked Yi Chen brazenly. The metal attribute energy was extremely violent. Clearly, she had reached the cultivation base of a martial venerable. "Get lost!" Yi Chen slapped her. The woman grunted and was sent flying directly. Her face was filled with shock. She did not expect Yi Chen to send her martial venerable cultivation base flying with a single slap. The young man's expression changed at first. Then, he looked at Yi Chen in an unfriendly manner. "Brother, aren't you being too ruthless?" At that moment, a pirate took the opportunity to leap up and sprinkle a handful of poisonous powder at him. However, a fireball suddenly shot out from Yi Chen's hand and burned the man into a flaming man. Eventually, only ashes were left on the ground. The young man's expression changed drastically when he saw that. Fire manipulation. Mystic Master. The other party must be a grade 5 Mystic Master. As he thought to this point, he immediately clasped his fists at Yi Chen and said respectfully, "Junior Jiang Qing greets Mystic Master. If you like Evil Dad in the City, please collect. Evil Dad in the City." Chapter 1107. As soon as Jiang Qing finished speaking, the woman in black and the rest were completely stunned. Mystic Master. These two words were like a bolt out of the blue, exploding in everyone's mind with a loud bang. They knew very well what Mystic Masters represented in the ancient desolate realm. Not to mention their spells, the Mystic Master union behind them was the most terrifying existence in the ancient desolate realm. Jiang Qing's master, Old Man Golden Shark, was also a Mystic Master. Moreover, he was a grade 6 Mystic Master. That was why he dominated the area within 3,000 kilometers of Golden Shark Island. And they had actually offended a Mystic Master? The one-eyed man, who was kneeling on the ground, shuddered as he thought to this point. Subsequently, he kowtowed to Yi Chen repeatedly. "Immortal, my daughter is ignorant. Please forgive her." The rest of them kowtowed repeatedly. There was no longer any disrespect on their faces. There was only fear and trembling on their faces. Yi Chen had the intention to kill initially. However, the sudden change in everyone's attitude made him gradually disperse his killing intent. Jiang Qing heaved a sigh of relief before saying respectfully, "May I know your name, senior? Why are you here?" Yi Chen said calmly, "I'm Mad Southern Yi. I accidentally stumbled upon this place. I'm looking for a map." As soon as these words came out, the crowd did not seem to believe it. On the other hand, the one-eyed man took the initiative to say, "Immortal, my name is Wang Hai. This is my daughter, Wang Mei. May I know what kind of map you need?" Yi Chen said without hesitation, "A map that shows the location of this place and other places. The more detailed, the better. I wonder if this will do." Wang Hai took out a sheepskin scroll immediately and handed it to Yi Chen. Yi Chen took it and frowned slightly. The map covered dozens of islands of various sizes nearby. At the end of the day, it only covered the sea. As if sensing his dissatisfaction, Jiang Qing thought about it and suddenly said, "Senior, do you want a map that includes the land?" "Yes." Yi Chen looked at him in anticipation. Jiang Qing seemed to be hesitating. He gritted his teeth and said, "I don't have the map you want, but my master does." "Your master?" Yi Chen said. "That's right." Jiang Qing smiled proudly. My master, Elder Golden Shark, is known as the #1 person in the Golden Shark 13 archipelago. He is also a mystic master. Can you introduce me to your master? Yi Chen looked at him with a burning gaze. Unexpectedly, Jiang Qing showed a troubled expression and said, Senior, you may not know this, but the southern islands are in danger. My master is discussing with other seniors about the enemy. I'm afraid he doesn't have time to see you now. Don't worry about it. You just need to bring me there. Yi Chen shook his head while smiling. Only then did Jiang Qing reluctantly nod his head. Afterwards, he had Wang Hai and the others clean up before returning to the ship and heading towards the northern seas. Along the way, Yi Chen learned that he was in the real sea of the Tianfeng Sea area. There were countless islands of various sizes in the Tianfeng Sea area. These islands were rich in resources and had been inhabited by people for generations. As the saying goes, where there are people, there will be Jianghu, and there will also be alliances for benefit. The Golden Shark Island that Wang Hai and the rest were on was one of the 13 archipelago. Jiang Cheng's master, Elder Golden Shark, was the nominal owner of the 13 archipelago. There were many forces like the 13 archipelago. They formed an alliance because they were bordering each other, and they were called the Southern Islands Alliance. 3 days ago, a challenge was shot into the Southern Islands Alliance's sea area. It said that someone would come to occupy the Southern Islands in 3 days. This naturally angered everyone in the Southern Islands. Therefore, in the past 3 days, the Southern Islands that covered tens of thousands of kilometers had been strictly guarded, and the island masters had gathered to discuss strategies to deal with the enemy. During this period, Yi Chen had probed Jiang Qing and the rest to see if they had seen another netherworld ship. However, to his disappointment, be it Jiang Qing, Wang Hai, or the rest, they were all at a loss. Thinking to this point, he could only ask something else. Have you heard of Tianfeng City? The reason why he asked that was because the Qingmu Fort was in Tianfeng City. Tianfeng City? Jiang Qing looked at Yi Chen in surprise when he heard that. Senior, have you been to Tianfeng City? Even the others had looks of envy on their faces. Yi Chen said, I've heard of it, but I've never been there. Jiang Qing did not doubt it. Instead, he said with a smile, Senior, you might not know this, but it's not easy to enter Tianfeng City now. Why? Yi Chen was surprised. Wang Hai interrupted, Immortal, I wonder if you've heard of the Qingmu Fort? I've never heard of it. Yi Chen's heart skipped a beat. Wang Hai looked at him in surprise and continued, The Qingmu Fort is now one of the 5 overlords of the Tianfeng Sea area. It's said that there's a martial ancestor powerhouse guarding it, and this martial ancestor powerhouse is the young mistress of the Qingmu Fort, Mu Kaiwei. Apart from Jiang Qing, the rest of the people were shocked by his words. A martial ancestor powerhouse. In their eyes, he was no different from an immortal. He could easily cause landslides and the earth to crack. What they did not notice was a gleam flashing through Yi Chen's eyes. You're a martial ancestor so soon? A martial ancestor was equivalent to a supreme giant on Earth, and it was also equivalent to a beginner-stage golden core cultivator. Before he left the Tianfeng Sea area, he had given Jur a cultivation method and some medicinal pills. In that case, Mu Kaiwei had also cultivated that cultivation method. However, he still did not expect that Mu Kaiwei would reach golden core in just over a year. Her aptitude could be said to be monstrous. Wang Hai continued, The Qingmu Fort is the true owner of Tianfeng City. It's said that the Qingmu Fort is a subject of the Great Li Dynasty, the overlord of the Tianfeng Sea area. However, the two seem to have fallen out. The Great Li Dynasty sent troops to attack the Qingmu Fort, but they were defeated. Therefore, the Qingmu Fort and the Great Li Dynasty maintained a relatively delicate situation. Yi Chen's eyes gleamed when he heard that. He was extremely relieved. In other words, the Qingmu Fort has grown to a point where even a dynasty has to fear it? That's right, Wang Hai nodded. Jiang Qing continued, however, I heard from my master that the King Mu fort hasn't been having a good time recently. Why? Yi Chen looked at him fixedly. Jiang Qing said with uncertainty, there are 5 overlords in the Tianfeng Sea area, and the King Mu fort is one of them. It's said that the sect competition is about to be held, and many forces are eyeing the King Mu fort. There are many forces arranged by the Great Li dynasty. Senior brother, didn't you say that the young mistress of the King Mu fort, Mu Kaiwei, is a martial ancestor powerhouse? Wang Mei, who had been silent all this while, could not help but say, she's already a martial ancestor. There are very few existences that can threaten her, right? Her life goal was to become a martial ancestor powerhouse, but she was only a martial venerable now. Actually, that's not the case. Jiang Qing also revealed a yearning expression. There's no lack of martial king powerhouses among the other 4 overlords. Let me ask you, under the pressure of the 4 overlords, how can the King Mu fort sit back and relax? He did not notice that there was a cold gleam surging out from under Yi Chen's faint smile. The flawless chapter of The Monstrous Nanny in the City will continue to be updated on the mobile game bar. There are no advertisements on the website, so please bookmark and recommend the mobile game bar. If you like Evil Dad in the City, please collect Evil Dad in the City. Chapter 1108. The sea breeze whistled as the boat sailed against the current. Yi Chen stood on the ship and looked at the endless horizon. He breathed in the salty sea breeze, but he was not calm. When he returned to the Tianfeng Sea area this time, he originally wanted to borrow the power of the King Mu fort to search for the ghost ship and the whereabouts of Su Yuhan and the others. However, he did not expect that through the narration of Jiang Qing, Wang Hai, and the others, he would find out that the King Mu fort was facing a crisis. His eyes flickered nonstop as he gradually made up his mind. No matter what, the King Mu fort had some connections with him, so he would definitely not sit back and do nothing. Especially since Jiu and Mu Kaiwei had cultivated the cultivation technique that he had imparted to them and were considered half his disciples. As he thought of this, a resolute and cold figure appeared in his mind, and his heart warmed slightly. Meanwhile, the woman in black, Wang Mei, sighed heavily. No matter what, a legendary figure like young Miss Mu isn't someone we can look at directly. I wonder what kind of person would be worthy of her. If it was said that Mu Kaiwei was hailed as the #1 beauty in the Tianfeng Sea region a year ago, then in this 1 year, this vase in the eyes of others had used her monstrous talent to prove herself. Thus, in the entire Tianfeng Sea region, countless young elites were infatuated with Mu Kaiwei. Wang Mei, who was also a woman, had also set her goal of surpassing Mu Kaiwei. Jiang Qing seemed to have thought of something and said, I once heard from Master that Miss Mu is already married. Senior brother, that's impossible, right? Wang Mei was taken aback and was filled with disbelief. I don't know the specifics. Jiang Qing shook his head slightly. It's said that a year ago, the King Mu fort held a wedding and recruited a son-in-law. His name is Shi Qianhan. In the beginning, everyone thought that he was a piece of trash who could not cultivate. What happened next? Wang Mei stomped her feet anxiously when she saw that Zhang Xian was halfway through his sentence. Senior Marshal brother, hurry up and say it. I'm dying of anxiety. This time, even Wang Hai and the other pirates couldn't help but look at Jiang Qing. They had lived in the sea for a long time and had never set foot on land, so it was the first time they had heard of such an interesting story. At that time, no one understood why the King Mu fort would recruit a piece of trash as their son-in-law. They also didn't understand why the beautiful first young mistress Mu would marry a piece of trash. Jiang Qing paused for a moment and said, later on, the King Mu fort fell into danger and was suppressed by the Bloodblade sect, the Seven Mysteries Mansion, the Vile Valley, and the Tianfeng City Governor's Mansion. The King Mu fort suffered heavy casualties, and at the critical moment, this useless son-in-law made a move. His expression turned grave as he slowly said, This person killed the experts of the 4 great forces by himself. He even killed his way into the 7 Mysteries Mansion and destroyed the entire 7 Mysteries Mansion. After that, he triggered the Emperor Conferment Tribulation and became a martial monarch in one go. As his voice fell, Wang Hai and the others sucked in a breath of cold air. Young Lady Mu's husband was actually a martial emperor? TSK, what's so great about it? However, Wang Mei said disdainfully, Senior brother, you just said that young Mistress Mu is a martial ancestor. What does a mere martial emperor count for in young Mistress Mu's eyes? Therefore, I feel that your rumor is false. The martial emperor was in front, and the martial grandmaster was behind. In comparison, the rumors about Shi Qianhan were nothing to her. That's what I heard too. Jiang Qing smiled bitterly. Junior sister is right because the mysterious son-in-law of the King Mu fort disappeared a year ago and has never appeared. It must be fake. Wang Mei said without hesitation. I admit that Shi Qianhan is stronger than me as a martial emperor. However, he's still not worthy of young Mistress Mu. The rest nodded one after another. Yi Chen shook his head lightly when he heard that. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Wang Mei saw him shaking his head. She could not help but say, Senior, do you think what I said doesn't make sense? Although the misunderstanding had been resolved when Yi Chen sent her flying with a slap earlier, she still took it to heart. Therefore, she could not help but ask. You're right. Yi Chen was stunned at first. Then, he nodded slowly and said, This Shi Qianhan is indeed not worthy of that young mistress of the King Mu fort. Only then did Wang Mei reveal a satisfied smile. At that moment, Wang Hai ordered his men to lower the sail and said respectfully, Immortal, we're about to reach the shore. Yi Chen lifted his head and looked over. He realized that the surface of the sea before him had become lively. Huge ships whistled over from all directions. In the end, they ran towards a huge island in the distance. As for the island in the distance, rather than calling it an island, it was better to call it a land with endless mountains. There were many huge sharks swimming around it, but they got along well with the crowd. Jiang Qing took the initiative to introduce, Senior, this is the real Golden Shark Island. These sharks were subdued by my master, which is why they're so respectful. At this point, his eyes were filled with pride. My master, the Golden Shark Elder, is a grade 5 mystic master. He tamed a shark king. Hearing the name Golden Shark Elder, the dozen or so pirates, including Wang Hai, could not help but have a hint of respect flash across their faces. Let's go. Jiang Qing ordered his men to dock the ship. Countless gazes looked over. Most of them were looking at Yi Chen. Clearly, they sensed that Yi Chen was a stranger. At that moment, a strange voice came from afar. Yo, isn't that 5th junior brother and 6th junior sister? What? Did you guys gain nothing from this trip? Jiang Qing and Wang Mei's expressions immediately sank. They saw a few figures striding over from the crowd 300 meters away. They were all young men and women who were dressed extravagantly. The auras within these people were not weak. The strongest one was a grade 3 mystic master, which was equivalent to a martial venerable. The leader was a young man with a slightly sinister face. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jiang Qing and the rest. Jiang Qing said indifferently, Second senior brother. Before the sinister young man could speak, a freckled woman behind him said coldly, Our 5th junior brother is becoming more and more arrogant. He only has 2nd senior brother in his eyes, but he doesn't care about me, his 3rd senior sister. That's right. 5th junior brother has only been in the sect for a few years, but he's already looking down on us. As time passes, won't he even look down on 2nd senior brother and eldest senior sister? 5th junior brother is not bad. The rest spoke one after another. However, all of them were mocking Jiang Qing. Yi Chen saw Jiang Qing's expression stiffen. Subsequently, he smiled. Senior brothers and sisters, you must be joking. How would I dare to look down on you guys? 5th junior brother, who is this? At that moment, the sinister man in the lead suddenly looked at Yi Chen with some hostility. Master once said that outsiders are not allowed to be brought to the island. Are you trying to break the rules? As soon as he said that, the rest looked at Yi Chen with hostility. The rest of them looked at Yi Chen with hostility. The celestial qi in their bodies surged secretly. End of this chapter. Chapter 1109. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little off, Wang Hai subconsciously said, "Immortal Qiu, this immortal Yi is." Before he could finish speaking, he was sent flying. The sinister-looking young man said, "Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to speak here?" "You." Wang Mei stepped forward and glared at Wang Hai and his wife furiously. "Enough!" Jiang Qing interrupted everyone and said coldly, "Second senior brother, I got to know this senior Yi outside. Thinking that the southern islands are facing a crisis now, I want to introduce him to Master." The sinister-looking man and the rest were stunned at first, then they laughed out loud. "Senior Yi." The freckled woman looked like she had heard a funny joke. She pointed at Yi Chen and said while sneering, "Fifth junior brother, did I hear you correctly? You actually said that this brat who hasn't even grown his hair is a senior? Ha ha, this brat doesn't have any aura on him at all, and his physique is so weak. He's actually a senior? Fifth junior brother is getting more and more muddle-headed. He's actually being fooled so easily." The rest of the people burst into laughter. "Fifth junior brother." The sinister-looking man took 2 steps forward and patted Jiang Qing's shoulder lightly. He sighed softly and said, "I know you're eager to make contributions and want to please Master, but you should at least have some brains." Jiang Qing's face was flushed red. The sinister-looking man said again, "All right, I won't disturb your intimate time with this senior Yi." With that, he left with the people behind him. Jiang Qing could hear their mocking laughter from afar. As soon as they left, Wang Mei could not help but question Yi Chen. "Senior, why didn't you help senior brother earlier? Why should I help him out?" Yi Chen said with a faint smile while carrying his daughter. Wang Mei was furious. Senior brother was mocked by second senior brother and the rest because of you. "All right, junior sister." Jiang Qing interrupted her and bowed to Yi Chen. "Thank you for not attacking earlier, senior. Otherwise, my life would be even more difficult in the future." He knew very well that his senior brothers and sisters had been targeting him and treating him as a thorn in their side. If Yi Chen had attacked earlier, he would have intimidated them on the surface. However, Yi Chen could not stay on Golden Shark Island forever. There would be a day when he would leave. Once Yi Chen left, her situation would become even more difficult. "Senior brother, you're too weak." Wang Mei was somewhat disappointed. On the other hand, Yi Chen secretly nodded. Jiang Qing was young, but he knew how to endure. This kind of person was usually the most promising. On the contrary, his senior brothers and sisters would one day suffer the consequences of their own actions. "Senior, this junior will bring you to see my master now." Jiang Qing led Yi Chen onto the island respectfully and walked toward the largest pavilion on the island. Yi Chen looked around as he walked. He realized that although this was a place where pirates lived, it was well managed. What surprised him the most was the faint aura of 3 martial monarchs on the island. It seemed that one of them was Jiang Qing's master, Old Man Golden Shark. 15 minutes later, Jiang Qing stopped in front of a huge pavilion. This was the palace where Old Man Golden Shark lived. It was known as Golden Shark Palace. Jiang Qing stepped forward and said to the old man guarding the door, "Uncle Gong, please inform Master for me." The old man called Uncle Gong took a few glances at them. His gaze lingered on Yi Chen for a few seconds before he walked in expressionlessly. Inside Golden Shark Palace, 3 old figures sat on the ground with 3 cups of fragrant tea in front of them. However, even when the tea was completely warm, no one took a sip. The 3 of them were an old man in a golden robe, an old man with a face as red as wax, and an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. If there were outsiders present, they would be shocked to discover that these three were the three most powerful people in the entire southern islands. Old Man Golden Shark, Old Man Huigong, and Old Man Wood Spirit. The red-faced Old Man Huigong frowned deeply. Brother Golden Shark, may I ask when your eldest disciple will return? With Xia Er's cultivation base as a grade 4 Mystic Master, it'll take her at least 5 days to get back. Old Man Golden Shark had a worried expression as he sighed softly. However, the Crimson Afterglow sect that Xia is from is a subsidiary force of the King Mu Fort after all. If she's escorted by the sect's elders, she'll be able to arrive in 2 days. 2 days? The ruddy old man Wood Spirit smiled bitterly. That mysterious force only gave me 3 days to wait. 1 day has passed today. I'm afraid your eldest disciple won't be able to return in time. At this point, he shook his head slightly and said, Moreover, I heard that the King Mu Fort is participating in the high sect competition. There's a lot of external pressure. As a subsidiary force, the Crimson Afterglow sect will definitely send out all their powerhouses. Now we can only leave it to fate. Old Man Golden Shark sighed faintly. Then, he looked at Old Man Huigong and said, Brother Huigong, are the northern and eastern islands unwilling to help us? Don't mention it. I've lost all my face, but they're still indifferent. They're even happy to see it happen. Old Man Huigong's expression was extremely grim. These old sly fools. In the past, when they saw that the Southern Islands Alliance was a force of the King Mu Fort, they were all enthusiastic. Now that the King Mu Fort is in danger, they're watching coldly from the sidelines. That's how people are. Old Man Wood Spirit did not mind at all. Then, he said to Old Man Golden Shark, Brother Golden Shark, have you really fought with that mysterious force? That's right. Old Man Golden Shark said with a solemn expression, That night, I was in closed-door cultivation when I felt a very powerful aura charging over. I chased after it and fought it. After 5 rounds, I was injured by it with a single palm strike. There was a hint of fear in his eyes. If it wasn't for my beast pet, the Golden Shark King, who saved me, I'm afraid I would have died by now. This person must be a martial ancestor realm powerhouse. Old Man Huigong and Old Man Wood Spirit looked at each other and said in unison, Even if he's not far from the martial ancestor realm. In that case, doesn't that mean that even if the powerhouses from the Crimson Afterglow sect come, it'll be useless? Old Man Golden Shark's heart sank completely. At this moment, a respectful voice sounded from outside. Master, Jiang Qing is back, and he brought an outsider to see you. An outsider? Old Man Golden Shark's expression darkened slightly, and he said with some displeasure, Didn't I set a rule that outsiders are not allowed on the island? On the sea, territorial awareness was even stronger than on land. The entire southern islands was extremely exclusive, and no one had ever dared to violate the rule. I'm not sure, Uncle Gong said again, but I heard Jiang Qing address that young man as senior, and his tone was extremely respectful. Senior? Young man? Old Man Golden Shark and the other two looked at each other, and there was a hint of displeasure between their brows. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:10. In Golden Shark Palace's lounge. Dressed in a long golden robe, Elder Golden Shark sat on a high platform. He looked dignified without being angry, and his eyes were burning. Meanwhile, Old Man Mu Ling and Old Man Huigong were sitting below. Both of them were staring at Yi Chen. Jiang Qing respectfully knelt in front of the three. Disciple greets Master, Senior Wood Spirit, and Senior Huigong. Get up! Old Man Golden Shark raised his hand slightly before looking at Yi Chen behind him. His gaze was rather sharp. Who's this? Master, I met Senior Yi on the way back. Jiang Qing told the story in full detail. As soon as he finished speaking, the three of them, including Old Man Golden Shark, looked at Yi Chen scrutinizing him. There was finally a slight change in the trio's gaze when they heard that Yi Chen had killed a master with a single glance and sent Wang Mei, a martial venerable, flying with a single slap. With such a technique, his strength would definitely not be lower than the pseudo-emperor stage. However, what puzzled them was that there was no cultivation fluctuation on Yi Chen at all. With that thought in mind, Elder Golden Shark took the initiative to speak. "Fellow Taoist Yi, may I know where you're from?" "I'm from the north," Yi Chen said coldly. "I passed by this place by accident. Since I don't know the geographical location, I'd like to ask for a map from you." As soon as he finished speaking, Old Fire Master immediately sneered. "You came from the northern region?" Jiang Qing was shocked at first, but then a bitter smile appeared on his face. "Not bad." Yi Chen nodded lightly. "Nonsense." Old Man Mu Ling snorted coldly. "Do you know how far the northern region is from my Heaven Wind Sea region? It's hundreds of thousands of miles away, and there are countless spatial rifts. How did you get here?" "That's right. The northern region is extremely far from the Tianfeng Sea area. Even if a martial arts grandmaster wanted to cross the northern region, it would be impossible, not to mention the spatial crack." Old Man Golden Shark nodded too. There was a hint of hostility in his eyes when he looked at Yi Chen. "May I ask how you got here?" "Of course, I came through the wormhole," Yi Chen said without thinking. "Ridiculous." Without waiting for him to finish, Old Firesmith immediately interrupted. "Wormhole? Do you know what a wormhole is? In the entire Tianfeng Sea area, only the Great Li dynasty has it. Even the 5 overlords like the King Mu fort don't have it." Speaking of this, his eyes were extremely sharp. The wormhole of the Dali dynasty can only be used by the royal family. Moreover, we have lived in the southern islands for hundreds of years. Why haven't we found the exit of the teleportation matrix? In my opinion, you must be a spy sent by an outsider to find out the real situation of the southern islands. As soon as he said that, 3 waves of killing intent exploded in the hall. The 3 waves of killing intent were extremely sharp, and they locked onto Yi Chen. Yi Chen frowned slightly. The 3 people in front of him were only at the martial monarch realm. He had intended to ask them to lend him the map, but he did not expect them to be so untactful. "Master, please calm down. Seniors, please calm down." Right at this moment, Jiang Qing suddenly knelt down heavily. "Disciple is willing to use my life to guarantee that Senior Yi is definitely not a spy." As he spoke, he pressed his head against the ground and kowtowed heavily. Not long after, his forehead was already red. "You guarantee it with your life?" Old Man Golden Shark smirked coldly. "What is your life compared to the millions of people in the southern islands? What if you alone bring disaster to the southern islands?" Jiang Qing did not say a word and kowtowed heavily. Not long after, the entire ground was dyed red with blood. At this moment, Uncle Gong walked in and said, "Master, there's a conflict between the northern islands and us. A group of juniors are fighting." Old Man Golden Shark's expression changed slightly. He looked at Jiang Qing, who was kneeling on the ground, and then at Yi Chen. Then, he said, "Be ****, get out of here with your men." Jiang Qing stood up. Ignoring the blood on his head, he led Yi Chen out of the hall. After they left, Old Man Mu Ling could not help but say, "Fellow Golden Shark, this person's background is unknown. Why didn't you attack just now?" "It's precisely because this person's background is unknown that I didn't attack." Old Man Golden Shark shook his head slightly and said, "This is a sensitive period. Without knowing the other party's background, it's better to stay put. As long as we monitor him, we will definitely discover any intentions of this person. Fellow Golden Shark is indeed wise." Old Man Huagong revealed a look of realization and was filled with admiration. That afternoon, Yi Chen was arranged by Jiang Qing to stay in a cave abode on the island. The food was not bad. The people on the island had different opinions about his arrival as an outsider. Moreover, someone deliberately spread the news that Jiang Qing addressed Yi Chen as senior. Jiang Qing immediately became a laughingstock. However, even so, no one dared to attack Yi Chen. After all, Jiangqing was Old Man Golden Shark's disciple. Meanwhile, Yi Chen realized that there were people staring at him around the cave abode, as if they were monitoring a criminal. He did not care about that at all. Apart from meditating in closed-door cultivation, he would stroll around the island with his daughter. When Old Man Golden Shark and the other two heard his actions, they were confused by Yi Chen's actions. "Senior brother, did you hear that? Everyone outside thinks you're a fool," Wang Mei complained to Jiangqing under the rumors. "In my opinion, are you mistaken? Perhaps that brat isn't a grade 5 mystic master at all. He's at the pseudo-emperor stage at most, junior sister, even if Senior Yi isn't a grade 5 mystic master and is only a pseudo-emperor, he's still a senior to us," Jiangqing comforted. "Anyway, be careful. It's best not to lose your prestige in master for an outsider. You might even be disliked by master." Wang Mei left after saying that angrily. That night, when most people were still asleep, Yi Chen lifted his head to look at the sky as if he had sensed something. There was a gleam in his eyes. Is he here? At the next moment, he picked up the snoring little girl and teleported out, landing in front of Jiangqing, who was on guard. "Senior, it's so late. Why aren't you resting?" Jiangqing was shocked at first before he said. Yi Chen squinted and said calmly, "If you don't want to die, it's best not to leave me." "What did you say?" Jiangqing could not react for a moment. "Fifth junior brother, did you hear that? This brat really thinks of himself as a senior and wants to protect you," a young man said sarcastically. The rest also laughed out loud. Just as Jiangqing was about to speak, a scream came from afar, breaking the dead silence of the night. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" Everyone was shocked and rushed in the direction of the voice. When they stood on the northeast side of the island, their bodies froze, and their pupils dilated. On the misty surface of the river, there were flames that covered the sky and covered the earth, rushing towards the island at high speed. If one took a closer look, they would realize that these were not flames. They were warships that looked like giant steel beasts. At a glance, there was no end in sight. Someone shuddered and shouted in fear, "It's the Navy. It's the Dali Dynasty's Navy." End of chapter. Chapter 11:11. Someone shouted in fear, "It's the Navy. It's the Navy of the Great Li Dynasty." At the next moment, the entire Golden Shark Island instantly fell into an uproar. People kept waking up from their sleep and gathering over. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh as three figures with powerful auras rushed over, the faces of Old Man Golden Shark, Old Firesmith, and Old Man Wood Spirit were revealed. On the surface of the sea less than 3,000 meters away from Golden Shark Island, densely packed warships floated on the surface of the sea. The sea breeze whistled and the flags fluttered. On these warships there was an endless army. They held torches in their hands, and they were filled with an overwhelming killing intent. At the front, there were countless ferocious beasts dragging the warships forward. These beasts were like mountains, covered in bone spikes and had sharp fangs. As they moved forward, their bone armor collided with each other, causing the seawater to boil. When they saw the word Li on the warship's flag, the three of them gasped, "It's really the Great Li Dynasty's navy. Moreover, it looks like it's the most elite navy of the Great Li Dynasty. It must be the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, Luo Kadi." Old Man Golden Shark's lips moved slightly, and the words he said made everyone's hearts sink. The Great Li Dynasty was the #1 overlord of the Tianfeng Sea area, surpassing all the sections. Even the 5 super sects of the Tianfeng Sea area like the King Mu Fort had to fear this colossus. The navy on the ship before them added up to no less than 100,000 people. Every single one of them was a martial artist who was familiar with water, and they were all experienced tigers and wolves. Facing such an army, even the millions of people on Golden Shark Island and the entire southern islands would probably be razed to the ground in an instant. Most importantly, the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Great Li Dynasty's navy, Luo Kadi, had already shocked the world. With him personally leading the army, How could the southern islands resist? Yi Chen was also surprised. Judging from the appearance and equipment of the navy, this so-called Great Li dynasty had already surpassed the great dynasties of the northern region. Old Man Firesmith said with a solemn expression, "The southern islands and the Great Li dynasty don't border each other, and there's no conflict between us. Why would the Great Li dynasty attack the southern islands in the middle of the night?" His words immediately reminded everyone of something. That was right. The Dali dynasty was located in the northern part of the Tianfeng Sea area, no less than 100,000 nautical miles away from the southern island. The two should not have interfered with each other. Old Man Mu Ling's expression changed slightly. He seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoists, could it be that the mysterious force from before was the Dali dynasty?" Elder Golden Shark was alarmed when he heard that. A day ago, the entire southern islands had received a challenge from a mysterious force. They had thought that some force wanted to take over the southern islands, and they had even sent people to the mainland to ask for reinforcements. Who would have thought that the Dali dynasty's navy would suddenly appear? If the mysterious enemy of the southern islands was really the Dali dynasty, then they had no chance of winning this battle. "I'll go and ask." Elder Golden Shark took a deep breath before leaping up. He landed directly on the surface of the sea as his voice reverberated across the surface. "I am the Lord of Golden Shark Island, Old Man Golden Shark. May I ask if you are the Deputy Commander of the Dali Dynasty Navy, Luokadi?" As his voice fell, the ferocious beasts that were advancing in the distance immediately stopped, causing the warships on the surface of the sea to stop as well. After a while, a huge dragon ship floated out from within. A man in black stood on the deck of the dragon ship. The man in black was around 40 years old. He was burly and majestic, and his eyes shone brightly. "I didn't expect you to know my name. It really is Luokadi." Old Man Hua and Old Man Mu Ling looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. "Lord Luo." Elder Golden Shark cupped his fists at Luokadi from afar and said, "The southern islands have never offended you. Why are you attacking the southern islands today?" Luokadi stood proudly on the deck and sneered in the wind. "The King Mu fort disrespects the imperial power and ignores the Dali dynasty's emperor. As a force under the King Mu fort, you should be annihilated." Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, the entire Golden Shark Island fell into an uproar. Countless people were terrified. The expressions of Elder Golden Shark and the other two changed. What they did not notice was that a gleam flashed through Yi Chen's eyes. The southern islands are actually a subsidiary force of the King Mu fort? Old Man Mu Ling smiled bitterly and looked at Luokadi from afar. "Luokadi, you've invaded the southern islands today. Aren't you afraid that the King Mu fort will start a war with the Dali dynasty after finding out about this?" There was a hint of threat in his tone. The King Mu fort and the Dali dynasty had fought a huge battle a year ago. Later on, the King Mu fort barely won. Not only did the Dali dynasty fear them, they even accepted more than 10 cities, including Tianfeng City. A mere King Mu fort wants to start a war with the Dali dynasty? Luokadi, who was on the dragon ship, seemed to be disdainful. "A year ago, the Dali dynasty lost because we underestimated our enemy. Do you think the King Mu fort still has a chance now?" At this point, his face was filled with cold killing intent. "To tell you the truth, the King Mu fort is currently being targeted by everyone in the 5-sect competition of the Tianfeng Sea area. Perhaps in a few days, you'll hear the news of the King Mu fort being destroyed. In that case, isn't the 5-sect competition a scam? A scam by the Dali dynasty against the Southern Islands High Sect?" Old Man Hua Gong's expression changed drastically. "Ha ha ha!" Luokadi suddenly laughed maniacally. "I'll tell you one more thing. A day ago, the mysterious powerhouse who injured Old Man Golden Shark was arranged by me. My goal was to make you guys request help from the King Mu fort. The King Mu fort can't even take care of itself now. If its strength is dispersed because of you idiots, it'll be even easier for the Dali dynasty to get rid of it. What? Old Man Golden Shark and the other two trembled violently. They had never expected that the Dali dynasty would actually painstakingly set up such a trap in order to deal with the King Mu fort. First, they used the mysterious force to attack the southern islands to cause panic and make them send people to the King Mu fort to ask for help. Then, they dispersed the King Mu fort's strength. Shameless! Old Man Mu Ling was so angry that his face turned livid. Shameless? Luo Kadi sneered. There's nothing too deceitful in war. You pirates can only blame yourselves for not knowing what the art of war is, much less encircling and attacking reinforcements. Alright, I've said enough to you guys. After I kill you guys, the entire southern islands will belong to the Dali dynasty. The smile on his face suddenly turned cold, and then he waved his hand. Advance, trample the southern islands, leave no one alive. Roar. The ferocious beasts that were originally quiet and motionless on the surface of the sea moved together, roaring as they charged towards Golden Shark Island. In an instant, tens of thousands of sails fluttered, and killing intent surged through heaven and earth. The entire surface of the sea was on the verge of overturning. Seeing this, Old Man Golden Shark and the other two's faces turned grim. Clearly, they realized that there was no turning back. Everyone, since the Dali dynasty won't give us a way out, then we don't have to endure anymore. Old Man Golden Shark's aura erupted from his body and swept across the surface of the sea. His voice was extremely cold. If you don't want to die, then fight. At that moment, Jiang Qing, who was next to Yi Chen, pulled out his sword and roared, "Everyone, there's no way out. Kill! Kill!" Almost at that moment, the hundreds of thousands of people on Golden Shark Island roared in unison, their expressions incomparably furious. If the Great Li dynasty only wanted to conquer Golden Shark Island or capture them alive, they might not have been so eager to fight. However, Luo Kadi had made it clear that he wanted to flatten Golden Shark Island and kill them all. This was equivalent to not giving them a way out. This was equivalent to forcing everyone into a dead end. The only thing they could do now was to fight to the death. Old Man Mu Ling flicked his finger, and a green arrow of command landed in the hand of a young man. "Feng'er, take my arrow of command and quickly head to Wood Spirit Island to gather everyone to reinforce Golden Shark Island." "Yes, father." The young man took a deep breath in. Holding the arrow of command, he turned into a ray of light and flew towards Golden Shark Island. "Yen Zhao, take my arrow of command and gather everyone at Firework Island to reinforce Golden Shark Island." Old Man Huagong did the same. At the same time, the warship that was 3,000 meters away was getting closer and closer to the island. The almost materialized murderous aura almost suffocated many people. In the next moment, arrows that blotted out the sky and covered the earth shot over from the surface of the river, causing one's scalp to go numb. End of this chapter. Chapter 11-12. Under such a dense barrage of arrows, many people screamed in pain as they were turned into porcupines. Whoosh! An arrow was pointed at Yi Chen. The little girl closed her eyes by instinct out of fear. Yi Chen squinted and the arrow shattered on the spot. "How dare you!" Old Firesmith and Old Man Wood Spirit stepped out together and leaped to the surface of the sea, standing side by side with Old Man Golden Shark, intercepting many arrows for everyone. But Golden Shark Island still lost many people, and this was only the first wave of attack from the Dali Dynasty Navy. Jiang Cheng's eyes were bloodshot. He had an idea and shouted, "Master, the enemy's momentum is overwhelming. Our Golden Shark Island can't defend against them. We can't fight them head-on. We can only retreat to the island and wait for reinforcement." Boom! Elder Golden Shark struck out with his palm and annihilated hundreds of arrows before roaring, "Fellow Taoists, quickly retreat to the island. Jiang Cheng, quickly activate the defensive array." Hearing this, Jiang Cheng immediately led many people to the core of the formation. However, at this moment, several figures directly charged out and killed many of Jiang Cheng's people in an instant. This sudden scene caught Jiang Cheng off guard. "Second senior brother, third senior sister, what are you two doing? What for?" The second senior brother he spoke of was a sinister-looking young man. He laughed coldly and said, "Junior brother, can't you see how ferocious the Imperial Court's army is? Golden Shark Island will only perish if we continue to stand our ground. It's better to give up and submit to the Imperial Court." Second senior brother is right. The third senior sister was a freckled woman. She said righteously, "Junior brother, as the saying goes, every man for himself. If you don't want to die, then scram to the side." Jiang Cheng couldn't believe his ears. "Master has always treated you well, yet you dare to say such things? Master? What qualifications does he have to be our master?" The malicious-looking youth snorted coldly. "This old thing is extremely biased and has always favored you. Does he really think we don't know? Why are you wasting your breath on him?" The freckled woman urged, "Hurry up and destroy the core of the defensive formation. I'll hold him back." "How dare you?" Jiang Cheng couldn't restrain himself from slapping his palm towards the young man, and then profound energy erupted from his palm to form a golden mark. "Junior brother, I'm your opponent." The freckled woman's profound energy also burst forth, neutralizing the former's attack. The commotion caused by the two of them exchanging blows naturally attracted the attention of the others. Behind Jiang Cheng, Wang Mei was both shocked and angry. "Master, second senior brother and third senior sister want to destroy the core of the formation and let the army of the Imperial Court in, bastard." Old Man Golden Shark was immediately enraged when he heard that. He leaped into the air and sped towards the island. "Stop him, we must stop him." Old Man Wood Spirit and Old Man Firesmith's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Once the protective array was destroyed, they would be completely finished. Yi Chen, who was in the crowd, frowned slightly. He glanced at the malicious young man who was less than 100 feet away from the core of the formation. Just as he was about to attack, an old man suddenly appeared beside him. It was Uncle Gong. The old man looked at him warily. "Little brother, I advise you not to act rashly. Otherwise, this old man will kill you on the spot." Old Man Golden Shark and the rest suspected Yi Chen's background, so they had instructed Uncle Gong to be wary of Yi Chen. Meanwhile, there were dozens of Golden Shark Island martial artists behind him. They were all looking at Yi Chen with hostility. Yi Chen could not help but shake his head. He secretly cursed Old Man Golden Shark and the rest for being so stupid. They could not even tell if he was a friend or a foe. Just as Old Man Golden Shark and the other two were speeding towards the island, a figure suddenly shot over from the warship in the distance. It was Luo Kadi who had attacked. "Old Geezer Golden Shark, I'm the opponent of you three pieces of trash." Luo Kadi's sleeves fluttered, and a terrifying true energy swept out like a storm with him as the center. Boom! Immediately after, terrifying energy erupted from his hand. Then, it condensed into a huge palm print that slapped at Old Man Golden Shark's head. "Luo Kadi, I'll kill you." Old Man Golden Shark's expression changed drastically. He could not care too much and immediately turned around. Mysterious energy erupted from his hand, and as runes surged, it condensed into a mysterious energy net to meet the attack. Rumble, as the two attacks collided, the sonic boom was like a deep muffled thunder that shook heaven and earth. Then, Old Man Golden Shark was sent flying on the spot. Many people were dumbfounded when they saw this. The number one person of Golden Shark Island was defeated? After Old Man Golden Shark stabilized his body with great difficulty, he spat a mouthful of blood and looked at Luo Kadi. "Why, you're the mysterious person from that night?" From the exchange earlier, he finally realized that the mysterious person who almost killed him that night was Luo Kadi. "You're not stupid. Unfortunately, you found out too late." Luo Kadi smirked coldly. He stepped into the air and attacked Old Man Golden Shark again with terrifying energy on his back. Boom! At that moment, Old Man Wood Spirit and Old Firesmith attacked at the same time. Both of them attacked with all their might, as if they wanted to force Luo-Kadi back. However, both of them were sent flying, and the mysterious energy in their bodies churned. A martial ancestor realm. The three of them looked at Luo-Kadi with incomparable shock. You actually broke through to martial ancestor realm? The three of them were all level 5 mystic masters, which was equivalent to 3 martial emperor realm old monsters. However, they were still no match for the other party. There was only one possibility. Luo-Kadi had become a supreme martial ancestor. Otherwise, he would not be so terrifying. Very surprised, right? Luo-Kadi stood with his hands behind his back. His face was full of mockery. I've been hiding for 20 years. Do you really think I'm just a martial emperor? Old Man Golden Shark and the other two immediately looked desperate. Not only did the Dali dynasty send 100,000 navy, they even sent a martial ancestor realm. How could they resist? Boom! Suddenly, a series of deafening explosions came from Golden Shark Island. The entire island seemed to be shaking from the commotion. The core of the formation has been broken. The same thought appeared in everyone's mind. Then, a sinister young man rushed over and knelt on one knee in front of Luo-Kadi. He said respectfully, "Your subordinate greets the deputy commander." Seeing this, Old Man Golden Shark almost vomited blood. "Chio-Xian, you bastard! How dare you betray me?" Countless people of Golden Shark Island glared at the sinister young man. Many of them even cursed him. "Betray you?" The sinister young man slowly raised his head and looked at Old Man Golden Shark. He grinned. "Old Man Golden Shark, do you really think I'm that useless disciple of yours, Chio-Xian?" After saying that, he turned his head and lifted his hand to tear it apart. Then, he turned to look at Old Man Golden Shark and said, "Take a look at who I am." What greeted everyone's eyes was a very delicate face, just like a woman's face. Thousand illusion art. Old Man Golden Shark's expression changed. He then said in disbelief, "This is the long-lost thousand illusion art? You have some eyes." Luo-Kadi said coldly, "Tian Chun is my lieutenant. A month ago, I asked him to disguise himself and come to your side." "That's right." Tian Chun revealed a mocking expression. "Your second disciple, Chio-Xian, was killed by me a month ago. You old thing, you still don't know about it." Haha! Elder Golden Shark's body shuddered violently as if he had aged several decades in an instant. "So you've been planning for a month in order to destroy my Golden Shark Island. How can your Golden Shark Island be worthy of my meticulous planning? In the end, I only want to deal with the King Mu Fort." Luo-Kadi seemed to be disdainful. Then, his gaze turned cold as he said indifferently, "The three of you go on your way. Soon, the King Mu Fort will come to accompany you." His voice fell. He soared into the sky like a rock spreading its wings. Then, he descended from the sky and struck at Elder Golden Shark and the other two. Ha ha! Elder Golden Shark suddenly burst out laughing. "Luo-Kadi, don't be arrogant. Even if the three of us die and the southern islands are destroyed, the Great Li dynasty won't be able to destroy the high-sex King Mu Fort." "Not bad." Old Man Wood Spirit and Old Firesmith also laughed sorrowfully, "because there's a man behind the high-sex King Mu Fort that your Great Li dynasty can never afford to offend. If this person makes a move, killing you will be as easy as killing a chicken." "Kill me like killing a chicken?" Luo-Kadi snorted coldly. "Who can kill me? Who dares to kill me? Go on your way, you three pieces of trash." Jiang Cheng's eyes were bloodshot. "Master? Island Master?" Everyone on the island was so furious that their eyes almost popped out of their socket. Right at this moment, an indifferent voice sounded from a distant corner, "I can kill you, and I dare to kill you. P.S. I haven't been updating well recently, so I've been too embarrassed to say anything. Today I'll say something." The new coronavirus is very serious, so everyone must be careful. Try to stay at home during the new year and don't go far. Try to wear a mask when visiting relatives. Also, don't participate in banquets and entertainment activities with many people, such as playing cards and mahjong. End of this chapter. Chapter 11-13. Who can kill me? Who dares to kill me? Luo Kadi's arrogant voice reverberated across the surface of the river as he charged towards Elder Golden Shark and the others like a golden-winged rock. Everyone on the island, including Jiang Qing, fell into despair at that moment. After all, Luo Kadi was a martial arts grandmaster, while the Golden Shark Elder and the other two were only martial monarchs. The difference between a martial arts grandmaster and a martial monarch was huge. Just as everyone believed that Elder Golden Shark and company were doomed, a faint voice sounded from a distant corner. I can kill you. I dare to kill you too. Although this voice was neither loud nor soft, every single word was heard by everyone present. Even Luo Kadi himself was no exception. His falling body paused for a moment before he suddenly looked in the direction of the voice. A skinny young man walked out from the crowd on the island with a little girl in his arms. The young man had a head full of white hair, a deep gaze, and a cold expression, as if he didn't notice the danger in the atmosphere. It's Immortal Yi. In the crowd, the pirate leader Wang Hai could not contain his joy. Jiang Qing was overjoyed. Senior Yi. He only thought of Yi Chen at that moment. However, he soon felt uneasy. In his opinion, Yi Chen was at most a Tier 5 mystique adept. His combat prowess was equivalent to a martial emperor. Meanwhile, Luo Kadi was a martial ancestor. It would be extremely difficult for 4 martial emperors to defeat a martial ancestor. Why is it this kid? Suspicion flashed through the depths of Old Man Golden Shark's eyes when he saw that it was Yi Chen who spoke. Before this, he felt that there was something wrong with Yi Chen's identity and suspected that Yi Chen had ulterior motives toward Golden Shark Island. Therefore, he ordered someone to secretly monitor Yi Chen. However, to his surprise, it was Yi Chen who stood up to save them at this critical moment. Young man. The wood spirit Taoist smiled bitterly and said gratefully, We have misunderstood you before, so I apologize. However, this matter has nothing to do with you, so I hope you can leave quickly. Not bad. Old Firesmith also sighed and said, We'll hold Luo Kadi back. You just need to escape. If there's a chance, I hope you can report to the King Mu Fort. Yi Chen acted as if he did not hear their advice. He walked out slowly while carrying his daughter. Subsequently, he said coldly, I'll take care of what happens today. With his personality, he would not be willing to interfere in such a matter. However, Golden Shark Island was a subsidiary force of the King Mu Fort after all, so how could he ignore it? Ah! Luo Kadi suddenly laughed out loud. He looked at Yi Chen with a ferocious expression and said, Brat, it'll be your turn soon if you want to die. Why are you in such a hurry? If you want me dead, that'll depend on what you've got. Yi Chen nodded calmly. Foolish brat, how dare you look down on the deputy commander-in-chief? You're simply courting death. Let me test you. Tian Chun narrowed his eyes slightly as a cold gleam flashed through his eyes. Subsequently, he turned into an afterimage and charged at Yi Chen. Martial Emperor. Elder Golden Shark's expression changed. This lieutenant who impersonated my disciple is actually a martial monarch? Even the expressions of Jiang Qing and the others changed. Let's get ready to save them. Old Firesmith shook his head slightly. Tian Chun was a martial monarch. Even he did not dare to be careless when facing him. Meanwhile, Yi Chen was merely a young man. Could he do it? Brat, remember my name. Tian Chun appeared before Yi Chen almost within the blink of an eye. He said with a ferocious grin, The person who killed you is Tian Chun, a valiant lieutenant under Luo Kadi, the deputy commander-in-chief of the Great Li Dynasty's navy. Before he could finish speaking, his entire body suddenly froze in midair. His gaze flickered, and he actually looked at the sky. How did this happen? That was the only thought in his mind. Then, he closed his eyes tightly and died. To the crowd at the side, what they saw was Tian Chun's head suddenly flying up and eventually falling into the water. Dead silence. The entire sea suddenly fell into dead silence. Countless people widened their eyes and looked at Yi Chen in shock. Killing a martial monarch with a raise of his hand? One must know that it was equivalent to a grade 5 mystic master. I misjudged. Elder Golden Shark's pupils constricted violently before he inhaled sharply and said, I misjudged. That's right. I didn't expect this young man to have such terrifying techniques. Elderwood Spirit forced a smile. Jiang Qing, on the other hand, was extremely excited. I was right. Senior Ye's strength is extraordinary. Wang Mei, who was beside him, was already stunned. On the other hand, Luo Kadi, who was in the air, did not move at all. He glared at Yi Chen with an extremely grim expression as he enunciated word by word, Why, you're a martial ancestor too? Killing a martial emperor with a raise of his hand. Only a martial ancestor could do that. However, Yi Chen's young appearance made him unable to believe that the person standing before him was a supreme martial ancestor. Yi Chen wiped the blood on his hands and did not even look at Tian Chun's falling body. You're still talking nonsense before you die. After saying that, he slowly raised his eyes and fixed his gaze on Luo Kadi. Now, it's your turn. So what if you're a martial ancestor? A cold gleam surged in Luo Kadi's eyes. His killing intent was so dense that it was almost tangible. I've never been afraid of anyone at the same level. Die, brat. Rumble. He slapped Yi Chen directly with his palm. The vast and terrifying true energy turned into a green dragon claw. It was like a real dragon entering the sea. It was mighty and terrifying. Oh no, Luo Kadi is actually using the Great Li Dynasty's grade 6 martial technique. Green dragon seizing the mountains and rivers. At the sight of this, the expressions of all three of them, including Elder Golden Shark, changed simultaneously. In the ancient desolate realm, cultivation methods were divided into 9 grades. The higher the grade, the greater the power. Even Elder Golden Shark and the other two only cultivated a 5th grade mysterious technique, because only existences at the Martial King level could possess a 6th grade mysterious technique. Although Luo Kadi was at the same level as Yi Chen now, with the support of a grade 6 martial technique, no one at the same level could resist this attack. Thinking to this point, Elder Golden Shark could not help but say, I wonder if fellow Yi can dodge it. Boom, when the majestic green dragon claw was less than 3 meters away from Yi Chen, it suddenly collapsed. It turned into a gentle breeze and fluttered Yi Chen's clothes. Meanwhile, Yi Chen stood proudly and did not move. How is this possible? At that moment, everyone was stunned. The most shocked were none other than Elder Golden Shark and the other two. Luo Kadi's attack did not harm Yi Chen at all? On the other hand, Luo Kadi's expression finally changed. There was a hint of shock in his eyes as he looked at Yi Chen. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying thought flashed through his mind. This person is a martial king. Thinking to this point, all the hair on his body stood on end. Without another word, he rushed toward the warship in the distance. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:14. Yi Chen did not panic. He used his palm as a saber. Boom, in the blink of an eye, a dazzling saber gleam erupted from his hand. Then, it turned into rumbling thunder that shook the mountains and rivers. In the face of such power, everyone was shocked. It was as if the entire sea had been torn in half. Break! Feeling the bone-piercing chill behind him, Luo Kadi's hair stood on end as he threw a punch with all his might. Rumble, with this punch, the bone-piercing chill finally disappeared. He sped up and ran toward the warship in the distance. However, he realized that the tens of thousands of Navy soldiers on the ship were looking at him with fear in their eyes. It was as if they had seen something terrifying. Didn't I break that sword? Why are they looking at me like that? Luo Kadi felt that something was wrong. He followed everyone's gaze and looked down. What he saw was a crack gradually appearing on the armor at his waist. It seemed to be a bloody line that could not be seen with the naked eye. At the next moment, the armor on his body exploded, and the lower half of his body below his waist suddenly fell into the sea. Only his upper body was still moving forward due to inertia. "I am dead." Luo Kadi's eyes widened, and his body instantly froze. Then, under everyone's gazes, his body exploded into pieces in all directions. Then, even his soul turned into dust. A martial master died with a single strike. At that moment, the world fell into dead silence. Everyone, including Old Man Golden Shark, fell silent. Their expressions were still frozen in the previous moment. On the warship in the distance, tens of thousands of Dali Dynasty Navy soldiers had turned into stone statues. A few seconds later, Old Man Golden Shark suddenly jolted and came to his senses. A supreme martial master died just like that? Terrifying, this guy is simply terrifying. Old Man Wood Spirit trembled. Old Man Huagong could not believe what he saw. There was only the thin figure who was unusually calm from the beginning to the end in his eyes. The most excited person was none other than Jiang Qing on the island. Initially, he thought Yi Chen was a grade 5 mystic master. However, Yi Chen's true combat ability was to kill a supreme martial master instantly. In that case, Yi Chen must be a grade 6 mystic master who was comparable to a martial king. At this moment, a gust of wind blew across the surface of the sea, blowing the stench of blood into the warship in the distance. Only then did all the Dali Dynasty's navy who had fallen into a daze wake up, and then the entire sea erupted in a clamor. The deputy commander-in-chief is dead. He was killed by that young man. What should we do now? That young man is too terrifying. I'm afraid only the governor can suppress him. Just as the tens of thousands of Navy troops were in a state of panic, a military general with the highest rank drew his sword and bellowed, "Kill them all! Avenge the vice-commander! Everyone, listen to my command, fire!" Swish, swish, swish. At that moment, the entire surface of the sea was filled with arrows, as if a locust plague had broken out. Not good, the island's defensive formation has been broken, we have nowhere to hide. Elder Golden Shark's expression changed drastically. Although Luo Kudi was dead, there were still 100,000 sailors in front of them. They were fully equipped with all kinds of supplies. Under the simultaneous attack of 10,000 arrows, Golden Shark Island would suffer heavy casualties. It's over. I'm afraid we'll all die here today. I don't want to die. God save us. For a moment the entire island fell into panic. Countless people pushed and shoved each other, trying to vent the fear in their hearts. Even Elder Golden Shark could not help but feel despair. Although they were martial emperors, they could only protect themselves at most when faced with 10,000 arrows. They could not protect the hundreds of thousands of people behind them. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly shot into the sky. What's he doing? The same thought flashed through many people's minds when they saw that it was Yi Chen. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen lifted his hands slightly and hugged the air. His aura changed. With this hug, it seemed to everyone that he was holding the world in his hands. It was a very mysterious feeling. Yi Chen took a deep breath in and crossed his arms. Divine punch created in 33 days, yin-yang wheel. Under everyone's shocked gazes, a huge vortex suddenly appeared above Yi Chen's head. The vortex was like the mouth of a ferocious beast, emitting endless tearing force. At the next moment, the overwhelming arrows that were rushing towards everyone changed their trajectories and were sucked into the vortex at the same time. The vortex also disappeared, and the sky was once again restored to its original color. The people who were panicking earlier were all stunned at this moment. They could not believe what they saw. Immortal technique. This is an immortal technique. Immortal Yi actually knows immortal techniques. We're not dead. At this moment, countless people were in an uproar. Some were excited, some were shocked, and some were in disbelief. On the other hand, the warship opposite them was dead silent. Everyone widened their eyes and stared blankly at the thin figure in the sky, as if they had seen a ghost. How is this possible? How did the arrows we shot change their trajectories? And they were swallowed by the big mouth in the sky? Demonic technique, this must be demonic technique. Release the arrows, release the arrows. Some of the generals shuddered and roared. At that moment, someone suppressed the fear in him and tried to shoot a second wave of arrows. Yi Chen lifted his head and looked over immediately. His gaze turned cold. "You're courting death." As soon as he said that, his hands turned into two giant hands that stretched out and swept across the entire surface of the sea. Then, an extremely indifferent voice came from his mouth. "Sea overturning seal." Rumble. The entire sea began to boil, and then countless waves rolled out, as if several nuclear bombs had been dropped. Then, under everyone's stunned gazes, the monstrous waves turned into a torrent that attacked the warships. Bang, bang, bang. Under the monstrous waves, countless warships were overturned, and the people on them were swept into the sea. "Help, help, I don't know how to swim." In an instant, countless heads surged on the surface of the sea, accompanied by all sorts of cries for help and screams. Elder Golden Shark and the rest were completely stunned. They were clearly still immersed in the earth-shattering divinity from before. A few seconds later, Taoist Wood Spirit was the first to snap out of his daze. His lips trembled as he said, "A single person defeated a 100,000 Navy army. Is this how terrifying a grade 6 mystic master is?" Yi Chen took a step out and flew across the sea directly. Eventually, he landed on a warship and lifted a person. It was a middle-aged man in blue armor. He was horrified when Yi Chen grabbed him. Yi Chen looked at him coldly and said coldly, "Tell me, what's the current situation of the King Mu Fort? P.S. I wish everyone a Happy New Year. Thank you for your support and encouragement over the past year. I wish you good health, good luck, and abundant wealth in the new year." End of this chapter. Chapter 11-15. Above the waters of the southern islands. After Yi Chen killed Luo Kadi, the deputy commander-in-chief of the Great Li Dynasty's navy in a domineering manner and destroyed tens of thousands of navy troops by himself, the entire surface of the sea was filled with all sorts of ghostly wails and wolf howls. There were the desperate cries of those who had fallen into the water. Yi Chen did not care about that at all. Instead, his gaze landed on a Great Li Dynasty Navy general that he grabbed. "Tell me, how's the current situation of the King Mu Fort?" Meeting his gaze, the Navy general began to shout and scream, as if he had been scared out of his wits. Yi Chen frowned. Subsequently, he pressed his hand on her head and performed the soul-searching tactic forcefully. His expression could not stop changing. After a short while, she directly turned the former's bones into ashes, and his gaze became extremely icy cold. By using the soul-searching tactic on the Navy general, he roughly understood the current situation of the King Mu Fort. The entire Tianfeng Sea region was divided into 4 parts: the East Sea, the North Sea, the South Sea, and the West Sea. In the 4 regions there were humans, Oceanic Clan, Demon Clan, and many other living beings. The King Mu Fort and the Great Li Dynasty were located in the East Ocean. The East Ocean spanned hundreds of thousands of miles, and there were originally countless sections. Each sect was divided into 9 grades, and each grade represented a heaven. There were 4 top-notch 9th-rank forces in the Eastern Sea, namely the Dali Dynasty, the Lingyuan Paradise, the Taiqing Palace, and the Kunwu Holy Ground. These 4 top forces dominated the entire East Sea. Below them, there were countless small sects and families, forming a strict pyramid. In the past year, the King Mu Fort had risen from the bottom and grown from a mere grade 4 sect to a grade 6 sect. The reason being that the King Mu Fort was originally just a fief of the Great Li Dynasty. The father and daughter of the Mu family were both subjects of the Great Li Dynasty. However, A year ago, the Emperor of greatly implemented a new policy and targeted the old aristocratic families in an attempt to consolidate the centralized power. For example, when Yi Chen came to Tianfeng City last time, the city governor's mansion of Tianfeng City colluded with the other sects to destroy the King Mu fort. Although Yi Chen resolved it back then, it caused the King Mu fort and the Great Li dynasty to completely break off. As a result, with the rapid rise of the King Mu fort and the checks and balances of the other three top forces, the Great Li dynasty naturally could not bear to sit by and watch. They had been scheming to completely destroy the King Mu fort. And in the Tianfeng Sea area, the 100-sect competition was held every 5 years. It was held in front of the four top forces, and all the sects in the Eastern Sea area competed against each other to obtain the protection of the four overlords. The King Mu fort was determined to win this competition because only by doing so would they be able to enter the eyes of the three overlords of the Grand Purity Palace, the spiritual ruin Grotto Heaven, and the Kunwu Holy Land. Then, they would be able to contend with the Great Li dynasty. How could the Great Li dynasty not understand this? Therefore, they wanted to use this opportunity to completely bring the King Mu fort down to the mortal world. Yi Chen frowned after finally digesting the memories in his head. It started half a month ago, before he rushed to the Heaven Wind Sea region. The 100-sect grand competition that was held once every 5 years had already begun. Moreover, from the looks of it, the King Mu fort was not in a good situation. It seemed like they had encountered a formidable enemy. The duration of the competition is a month. As long as the King Mu fort can hold on, I should be able to make it if I rush over now. Yi Chen's eyes flickered. A cold and stubborn figure could not help but appear in his mind. Can you hold on? As he thought to this point, his figure flashed and landed on Golden Shark Island. He looked at Old Man Golden Shark and the other two indifferently. I have something to ask the three of you. In the luxurious Golden Shark Palace, Yi Chen sat on the main seat. Old Man Golden Shark and the other two were sitting below him. However, the three of them were sitting nervously. They looked extremely respectful, and they would look at Yi Chen with complicated gazes from time to time. Especially Old Man Golden Shark. He had summoned Yi Chen here last time. However, he was the master back then, and he did not even take Yi Chen seriously when he spoke. However, the three of them were trembling in fear under Yi Chen's powerful aura. The situation changed so quickly. Judging from how Yi Chen killed Luo Kadi earlier and how he used his heaven-defying divinity to destroy the tens of thousands of navy troops, he must be a martial king. The three of them were shocked. Yi Chen did not care about their reactions at all. Instead, he looked at Old Man Golden Shark. Where is the 100-sect tournament held every 5 years? Old Man Golden Shark stood up subconsciously and did not dare to hide anything. Senior, it's at Tianxian Mountain. Tianxian Mountain? Yi Chen's eyes focused. Senior. As if sensing his confusion, Taoist Wood Spirit said, Tianxian Mountain is the largest mountain range in the Eastern Sea. It's known as the Immortal Mountain. It's over 90,000 kilometers away from Golden Shark Island. Do you know the exact route? Yi Chen asked again. Senior, we know the route. Old Man Golden Shark smiled bitterly. However, even if we set off now, I'm afraid we won't be able to make it in half a month. He vaguely guessed that the reason Yi Chen saved them was probably because he had a certain relationship with the King Mu fort. However, the 100-sect tournament had already begun for half a month. Even if they rushed over now, the 100-sect tournament would probably end by the time they arrived. It's fine. You just need to lead the way for me. Yi Chen chuckled softly. With his speed, if he did not sleep or rest, he would be able to cover the distance in half a day with his sword kinesis flight. Almost as soon as Yi Chen led Old Man Golden Shark away from Golden Shark Island, on the Tianxian Mountain, that was 90,000 kilometers away. It was a majestic mountain located in the boundless mountain range. It was surrounded by mountain peaks and ravines. The mountain was dazzling with the morning sun, and there was a faint celestial sound that filled the air, causing one to be amazed. If one took a closer look, they would realize that there were huge stone platforms set up in the entire Tianxian mountain. On these stone platforms there were countless stone steps that led to the sky. On these stone steps that led to the sky, countless people had already gathered. These people were from over 100 sects in the entire Eastern Sea. On these stone platforms of various sizes, the names of countless sects were engraved, such as the Heavenly Shaking Sect, the Great Whale Sect, the Dark Light Palace, and so on. On a huge stone platform that was relatively far away, compared to the hundreds of people on the other stone platforms, there were less than 10 people on this stone platform. It seemed extremely deserted. Among the 9 people, there were 2 beautiful figures standing at the front. On the left was a young girl in purple who was only 17 or 18 years old. Although the purple-clothed girl was still young, her facial features were already completely developed. Her lips were red and her teeth were white. She had a beautiful face, and there was a natural charm in the depths of her clear eyes. She was clearly a little beauty. On the other hand, the woman on the right was dressed in white. She was slightly tall, and her black hair was tied up casually. It hung down softly from her slender waist like a waterfall. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:16. Compared to the purple-clothed girl on the left, the white-clothed girl had bright eyes and white teeth. She was like a lotus that had just emerged from the water, elegant and peerless. Her white clothes fluttered casually in the wind, and she looked like a fairy that was about to ascend to the moon at any time. She was extraordinary. However, if one took a closer look, they would notice that there was a trace of melancholy and coldness on the woman's peerlessly beautiful face. Many people on the other stone platforms could not help but look at the former, and undisguised discussions spread out in all directions. Did you see that? That's the famous young mistress of the Mu family, Mu Kaiwei, who's known as the #1 beauty in the Tianfeng Sea area. We've long heard of young Mistress Mu's beauty. Now that we've seen her face today, we've realized that the rumors are true. If such a beauty and stunner could take a look at me, I'd be willing to die now. Shoo, be careful with your words. Not only is young Mistress Mu's beauty unparalleled, but she's also a supreme martial ancestor. The white-clothed girl on the stone platform did not seem to hear the discussions around her. Her eyes were still cold. At this moment, a middle-aged man in tight clothes slowly walked over. His brows were as gloomy as water. When she saw the person, the purple-clothed girl could not help but ask, "Master, how is it? Who's your next opponent?" The middle-aged man glanced at the white-clothed girl bitterly, and his lips moved slightly. "My King Mu Fort has drawn Siefiu from the grade 7 sect, the Painted Sound sect." The moment that was said, the purple-clothed girl immediately cried out in surprise, "Why did we draw him?" Even the white-clothed girl, whose expression had not changed, had a ripple in her beautiful eyes. The Painted Sound sect is good at painting and sound-killing technique. Their methods are extremely strange, and it's impossible to guard against them. Even among the grade 7 sects, they're ranked at the top. The purple-clothed girl bit her lips, and her expression was rather unpleasant, especially this Siefiu. It's said that he's the only descendant of the Painted Sound sect's patriarch, and he's known as the most talented successor of the Painted Sound sect. His strength is faintly touching the martial king realm. Young mistress, if you meet him, her eyes reddened, but she could not continue speaking. She could only look at the woman in white beside her with reddened eyes. How could the middle-aged man not know how powerful this was? After sighing softly, he looked at the woman in white and said, "Our King Mu Fort has only risen for a short period of time. It's far inferior to the Painted Sound sect. Moreover, our King Mu Fort has already advanced to a grade 7 sect after half a month of competition." His gaze toward the lady in white was filled with heartache. "In the past half a month, you've been fighting all the time, and you've never rested. Siefei's ability isn't something you can fight against." At this point, his lips moved slightly. Kaiwei, why don't we just give up? To the woman in front of him. He, King Mu, was very proud because his daughter had brought the King Mu fort to where it was today. But while he was proud, he felt even more remorse, guilt, and even heartache. As a father, he could only rely on his daughter to take the brunt of all the problems. The young lady in purple also advised. That's right, Mississippi. Why don't we give up? I heard that this CFAU is ruthless. I'm afraid that you, Father Juror, you don't have to persuade me anymore. The lady in white took a deep breath in, and her voice was extremely cold. I won't give up unless I fall. Even though her words were incomparably calm, it was mixed with dense, unswerving determination and stubbornness. King Mu smiled bitterly. Is it worth it? It's worth it. Mu Tsaiwei's voice was calm, and her gaze was slightly blurry. It's all thanks to him that our King Mu fort is able to achieve what it is today. When he left back then, I secretly swore that I would wait for his return with the King Mu fort, silly child. King Mu sighed faintly. Are you still thinking about the 3-year promise that person made before he left? I didn't. A blush suddenly flashed across Mu Tsaiwei's cold face. That person has been gone for more than a year. King Mu sighed with a complicated gaze. Do you think I don't know that you've been secretly investigating him for the past year? But what's the result? You still didn't find anything. That person seemed to have disappeared from this world. He came and left suddenly, and his identity is mysterious. His throat rolled a few times, and he hesitated to speak. I even suspect that he's already. Father, don't say any more. Mu Kaiwei interrupted him with an evasive expression. I believe him. I believe he's not dead. I believe he'll definitely return. Although she said that, she was not confident. That's right. It had been a year and a half. In the past year and a half, she had been constantly investigating that person's whereabouts, but the result caught her off guard. It was because there was actually a Shi Qianhan in the eastern wilderness. When she first heard the news, she was very happy. After paying a huge price to go to the eastern wilderness, she realized that Shi Qianhan only had the same name as that person. No one knew how disappointed she was at that time. Furthermore, no one knew how she had managed to survive the past year. Every day, she lived in self-doubt. Master, I also believe that young Master is still alive. Jior said firmly. Young Master promised to come back and marry young Mistress, so he'll definitely come back. Although she said that, she secretly stuck her tongue out. After all, she was the last person to see Yi Chun back then. He did not say that he would come back to marry young Mistress 3 years later. All of this was because she could not bear to see her young mistress haggard, so she said it on purpose. She did not expect her young mistress to sink deeper and deeper. Father, I'll go back and rest first. Let me know if there's anything. Mu Kaiwei muttered softly and was about to turn around and return to her temporary residence in the King Mu fort. I didn't expect my opponent to be the #1 beauty in the Tianfeng Sea area, young Mistress Mu. I've taken pity on her. Right at this moment, a frivolous and rude voice slowly came from afar. Immediately after, a handsome young man in white walked over with a gentle expression. There were many handsome men and beautiful women following beside him. It was this person's appearance that caused the originally noisy scene to instantly quiet down. In an instant, countless gazes turned to the white-clothed young man. Some people's expressions changed as they immediately recognized the other party's identity. They subconsciously made way for him. It's the genius disciple of the Grade 7 sect, Painted Sound sect, CFAU. Someone identified the white-clothed young man. In this 100-sect tournament, the Painted Sound sect crushed all the Grade 7 sections. It's all because of CFAU. It's said that he's the #1 martial ancestor. I heard that the Painted Sound sect's next opponent should be a Grade 8 sect. I didn't expect them to be the King Mu fort. They can only blame their bad luck. In an instant, many people whispered among themselves. Obviously, they were extremely afraid of CFAU. Mu Kaiwei stopped in her tracks and looked at CFAU with a cold expression. Jiu who was beside her, also had an unfriendly expression. End of this chapter. Chapter 11-17. Xiefeiyu did not care about the crowd's discussions at all. He sized up Mu Kaiwei and the rest with a slightly arrogant expression. He was very rude. King Mu's expression turned slightly grim. He took a step forward and said, "Young Master Xie, your painting sound sect is a high-grade 7 sect. Are you here to show off your might to my King Mu fort?" He protected Mu Kaiwei tightly behind him. This was almost the most primitive behavior of a father. As soon as he finished speaking, a skinny old man took a step out from behind Xiefeiyu. Then, his aura was completely revealed. Boom! An aura that belonged to a martial sect landed on King Mu. Blek. King Mu felt a terrifying pressure coming at him like Mount Tai was pressing down on him. He took a few steps back on the spot before spitting blood. "Master!" Jiu hurriedly supported him. The skinny old man said sinisterly, "Bastard, you're just trash from a mere grade 6 sect. What right do you have to speak to my young master in such a tone?" At the next moment, a frost-like sword gleam tore through the air and slashed at him with incomparable sharpness. "Oh no!" The skinny old man's expression changed drastically. He immediately retreated, but he was still too slow. As the sword gleam landed, his left arm was severed on the spot. "You're suppressing my father with your aura. I'll sever your arm." Mu Tsaiwei's cold voice rang out. The skinny old man endured the pain and said with a venomous gaze, "Mu Kaiwei, you be *t." At the same time, a storm surged in his heart. They were both martial sects, but he could not withstand a single attack from Mu Kaiwei. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. Everyone's eyes widened as they looked at Mu Kaiwei in shock. Even Xiefeiyu frowned. A cold gleam shot out of Mu Tsaiwei's beautiful eyes. "If you say another word, even Xiefeiyu won't be able to protect you." The skinny old man revealed a furious expression, but he forcefully swallowed his words. He really did not dare to take the risk. Xiefeiyu watched coldly from the side the entire time. At this moment, he slowly said, "Ms. Mu, I know that your King Mu fort wants to obtain the protection of the 3 sects by advancing to a grade 7 sect. Unfortunately, you've encountered me." "So what?" Mu Tsaiwei's beautiful eyes were cold. Xiefeiyu said with a faint smile, "I'll give you a chance. As long as you're willing to marry me, I can admit defeat in the upcoming competition. I can even help your King Mu fort become a grade 7 sect." The Heaven Wind Sea region's sects promotion method was very simple, and that was to first sweep away all the sects of the same level, and then challenge any high-ranked sects. For example, if a first-grade sect wanted to become a second-grade sect, it would have to first sweep through all the other first-grade sects and then issue a challenge to any second-grade sect. If it won, it would be promoted. As soon as Xiefeiyu finished speaking, there was an uproar at the scene. No one would have thought that Xiefeiyu's target was actually Mu Kaiwei, and he was so direct. Jiu-er's expression changed, and she subconsciously blurted out, "You want to hit on the young lady? You're delusional. Not only do I want to lay my hands on your young lady, but I also want to lay my hands on you." Xiefeiyu looked at her covetously. "I'll only consider giving the King Mu fort a chance of survival if both you and your young mistress marry me." "Shameless!" Jiu was so angry that her face turned red. Xiefeiyu was not angry. He continued to chuckle and look at Mu Kaiwei. "Miss Mu, what do you think? You have to know that the King Mu fort is a thorn in the Great Li dynasty's side. No one dares to save you. On the contrary, my painting sect is different." He was extremely confident. "My aunt is a member of the 3 sects, and my painting sound school is about to become an 8th-grade sect. Even the Dali dynasty will have to be wary of us." The 3 sects he mentioned were the Sky Purity Palace, the Spirit Ruins Paradise, and the Kunwu Holy Ground. Under everyone's gazes, Mu Tsaiwei's delicate body trembled slightly, and then she said very calmly, "Young Master Xie, instead of wasting your breath, Why don't you worry about the next arena? As soon as she finished speaking, the entire place fell silent. In everyone's eyes, CFAU's conditions were a little overbearing, but how could they not be tempted? So you're rejecting my proposal? CFAU's expression gradually turned grim. Since that's the case, then I'll say it here. With me around, your King Mu fort is not fated to be a grade 7 sect. As soon as he said that, Mu Tsaiwei's body trembled slightly, and then it was replaced by determination. You're just a piece of trash who's only a martial ancestor? What right do you have to represent the painting sound sect? Your painted sound sect is merely a 7th rank sect. What qualifications do you have to say such words to my friend? At this moment, an extremely indifferent voice suddenly exploded from the depths of the void. This sudden commotion caused the world to fall silent. Then, everyone seemed to have sensed something and looked above their heads. The space there trembled slightly and gradually began to distort. Then, over 10 figures appeared in the void. All of these figures wore golden divine armor, and their auras were extremely formidable. Most importantly, beneath them were ferocious beasts with protruding horns and ghastly armor. The roars of over 10 ferocious beasts shook the sky, and their ferocious might overflowed into the sky. All of them emitted a violent aura. The ferocious beast in the middle was the most extraordinary. Its entire body was covered in golden scales, and brilliant divine radiance surged as if there was a ball of golden flames burning. The most frightening thing was that the ferocious beast's aura actually caused the expressions of some martial kings to change. Golden Fur Ho, the symbol of the overlord of Eastern Wilderness, the Sure family. Someone's pupils constricted violently. On the back of the ferocious beast was a young man in white. The young man had a handsome face and a head of white hair. His eyes were filled with vicissitudes, and they were soul-stirring. He was like an undead that had returned from hell. Sure family, it's the overlord of Eastern Wilderness, the Sure family. Someone seemed to have thought of something and sucked in a breath of cold air. His face was filled with fear. Whoosh! The entire place fell into an uproar. Eastern Wilderness Sure family. This was a mysterious ancient family. Rumor had it that they were the descendants of divine beasts, and their descendants were born to fight. It was said that every member of the family would be born with a ferocious beast, Golden Fur Ho. The Sure family might not be famous in the Tianfeng Sea area, but they were the overlord of Eastern Wilderness. No one dared to provoke them, and their status was not inferior to the 3 sections. The moment Mu Kaiwei saw the white-clothed man appear, a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes, but it was more of a nostalgic look. Boom, boom, boom. At that moment, 3 figures with powerful auras appeared in the void. They were 2 old men with sharp eyes, and a woman in a Taoist robe with an extraordinary temperament. It's Elder One from the Spirit Ruin Wonderland, Elder Liang from Kunwu Sacred Ground, and Elder Ling from Tai Ching Palace. The pupils of everyone present shrunk when they saw the person who had arrived. Then, they unconsciously lowered their heads and revealed respectful expressions. The arrival of the Eastern Wilderness Sure family had alarmed the elders of the 3 sects, who had never shown themselves. Elder One from the Spirit Ruin Wonderland looked up at the dozen or so knights in the sky, and his gaze finally landed on the white-clothed man. I didn't expect the young master of the Eastern Wilderness Sure family, Sure Qianhan, to come to our Tianfeng Sea area. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. End of this chapter. Chapter 11-18. On top of the Tianxian mountain, everyone's eyes were fixed on him. Countless people widened their eyes as they stared at the dozen knights who were welcomed by the elders of the 3 sections. I didn't expect the young master of the Eastern Wilderness Sure family, Sure Qianhan, to come to our Tianfeng Sea area. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. Elder Tian, one of the 4 overlords of the East Sea of the Tianfeng Sea area, spoke. There was a moment of silence before a great uproar broke out. The Sure family of the Eastern Barren Territory. They are from the most mysterious ancient clan in the Eastern Barren Territory, the Sure family. Heavens, didn't the Eastern Wastelands Sure family never interact with our Heaven Wind Sea region? Why would it suddenly descend now? Many people's gazes were tightly locked onto the white-clothed youth in the sky as dense shock surged in their eyes. Is this person the new young master of the Sure family, Sure Qianhan? Just like his name, his bearing is extraordinary. Someone murmured. It is said that this young master Sure Qianhan appeared a year ago. One of the higher-ups of an 8th-rank sect said with a serious expression, in just a year, this person has swept away all of the younger generation of the Sure family and became one of the 4 young masters. Many of the higher-ups of the Sure family believe that he is the one who has the highest chance of becoming the young ancestor. As soon as these words came out, everyone was petrified. Junior Patriarch. These 2 words represented the identity of the Sure family's future successor, and also represented the future leader of the Sure family to suppress the entire Eastern Barren. While everyone was discussing, Sure Qianhan looked at Elder Tian Tian and the others and said, Elder One, you're too polite. I'm just here to visit a friend. Friend? The Spirit Ruin Cave's Elder Tian Tian was taken aback at first. He looked at the Kunwa Holy Land's elder and the Sky Purity Palace's elder in confusion before asking, May I know who young Lord Shure's friend is? Yes, we are also very curious. What kind of existence is able to befriend young Master Shure? Elder Liang of Kunwa Holy Land said with a gentle expression. The eyes of everyone on the ground lit up, and they couldn't help but look around. Clearly, they were curious about who Sure Qianhan's friend was. Sure Qianhan sized up the scene coldly, and then his gaze landed on Mu Kaiwei on the stone platform. The next moment, under everyone's gazes, the ferocious beast beneath him, the golden fur hoe, seemed to have sensed his intentions. It stepped through the air and landed beside Mu Kaiwei. At that moment, the young master of the Painted Sound sect, Xie Feiyu, who was less than 5 steps away from Mu Kaiwei, panicked slightly. He unconsciously took a step back. Sure Qianhan looked at Mu Kaiwei with a gentle expression and smiled. Miss Mu, I haven't seen you for half a year. How have you been? As his voice fell, the entire Sky Spiral Mountain suddenly fell into a dead silence. The friend of the Sure clan's young master, Sure Qianhan, was actually the young mistress of the Grade 6 sect, King Mu Fort, Mu Kaiwei? Countless people were in disbelief. Elder One and the other 2 couldn't help but look at each other. Their eyes were filled with confusion. They had some understanding of the King Mu Fort. Even though Mu Kaiwei was extremely talented, she still could not catch their attention. They could not figure out why an existence like the overlord of the Eastern Wilderness, the Sure family, would be related to a Grade 6 sect even though they were hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. At that moment, the expression of the relatively calm young master of the Grade 7 sect, Painted Sound sect, froze. Facing Sure Qianhan's greeting, Mu Kaiwei's expression softened slightly. She smiled sweetly and said, Thank you for your concern, young Master Sure. Kaiwei is fine. Kaiwei, how did he? King Mu, who was beside him, looked at Sure Qianhan, then at Mu Kaiwei. He wanted to say something but hesitated. He actually wanted to say why the white-clothed young man's name was exactly the same as that person's. Only Jiu was not surprised at all. Half a year ago, Mu Kaiwei had gone to the Eastern Wilderness to look for that person and met Sure Qianhan. As if sensing King Mu's doubts, Mu Kaiwei said indifferently, Father, young Master Sure is a friend I met in the Eastern Wilderness. It's just the same name. Only then did King Mu come to a realization. Then, he was a little excited. If his daughter could get to know such a person, wouldn't that mean that his King Mu fort was saved? I was wondering why young Master Sure would come to our Tianfeng Sea area from so far away. He's actually an old friend of Ms. Mu. The beautiful middle-aged woman from the Great Purity Palace, Elder Ling, said with a spurious smile. I'm afraid it's not as simple as an old friend, right? When the others saw her expression, they could not help but start guessing. They subconsciously thought that there was a relationship between Shi Qianhan and Mu Kaiwei. Even the young master of the Grade 7 sect, Painted Sound sect, Xie Feiyu, had an indignant expression on his face. He viewed Mu Kaiwei as his exclusive property. However, now that Shi Qianhan had appeared, whether it was in terms of strength or identity, he far surpassed him. How could he accept this? "I'm just an ordinary friend of Ms. Mu," Shi Qianhan smiled faintly. Although Xie Feiyu did not believe him, he still smiled. "Since young Master Shi and Ms. Mu know each other, I won't disturb you any more." With that, he turned around and was about to leave. He could be considered a sensible person. After knowing that there was no hope, he simply chose to withdraw. However, the moment he turned around, an extremely calm voice sounded behind him. "Did I ask you to leave?" Xie Feiyu stopped in his tracks and his expression turned ugly. He then turned around and looked at Shi Qianhan. "I wonder what else young Master Shi has to say?" The noisy scene gradually quietened down as countless gazes shifted between Shi Qianhan and Xie Feiyu. Someone seemed to have thought of something and a spurious smile appeared on his lips. Obviously, this young Master Shi from the eastern wilderness was going to point his spear at Xie Feiyu and stand up for Mu Kaiwei. Even Mu Kaiwei was slightly stunned. Elder Wen's expression changed slightly and he slowly said, "Young Master Shi, you're a guest. Why don't you follow us to the high platform to watch?" What he meant was that Shi Qianhan was a guest after all, and it was not good for him to cause trouble at the grand event of the Tianfeng Sea area. "No need." Shi Qianhan slowly raised his head to look at Xie Feiyu and said coldly, "I heard you threaten Ms. Mu earlier. You said that as long as you're here, the King Mu fort won't be able to advance to a Grade 7 sect?" Facing his domineering attitude, Xie Feiyu was a little angry. He said coldly, "Young Master Shi, this is a matter between the Painting Sound sect and the King Mu fort. It's not good for an outsider like you to interfere, right?" The atmosphere started to become oppressive. Many people shook their heads secretly. Although Xie Feiyu's strength and background could not compare to Shi Qianhan's, the Painting Sound sect had people in the three sects behind him, and they were locals of the Tianfeng Sea area. On the other hand, Shi Qianhan, who was from the eastern wilderness, was being so overbearing. It was a little rude. However, Shi Qianhan's expression turned cold. "I've already said that Ms. Mu is my friend. Since that's the case, Ms. Mu's matter is also my matter." End of this chapter. Chapter 11-19. As soon as he said that, the entire place was in an uproar. Many of them were shocked. It was as if he did not expect that this young master from the eastern wasteland Shi family would be so overbearing and openly support Mu Kaiwei. The skinny old man next to Xie Feiyu could not help but threaten, "Young Master Shi, don't forget that this is the Tianfeng Sea area, not the eastern wilderness." "Is that so?" Shi Qianhan replied calmly and suddenly looked at the skinny old man. A blood-red light flashed in his eyes. The latter's body stiffened and instantly turned into a stone statue, motionless. Old Fu, Xie Feiyu's expression changed, and he subconsciously reached out to touch his body. "Don't spit at him." The elders of the three sects spoke in unison. However, it was too late. As soon as Xie Feiyu's hand touched the stone statue turned into a stream of blood and flowed to the ground. A living person was gone in an instant. This sudden scene caused the crowd to burst into an uproar. "Blood Sea Buddha Eye." Elder Wen from the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven stared at Shi Qianhan and said word by word, "This is the Blood Sea Buddha Eye. I didn't expect young Master Shi to have awakened the innate divinity of the ancient clan." As soon as he said that, the expressions of the two elders from the Kunwu Divine Ground and Sky Purity Palace changed, and they looked at Shi Qianhan with fear in their eyes. Blood Sea Buddha Eye. The innate divinity of the mysterious ancient clan in the eastern wilderness, the Shi family, was strange and unpredictable. Rumor had it that when this divinity was mastered, It could turn the area within 1,000 feet into a sea of blood with a single glance. In the past 1,000 years, only the previous master of the Shi family had awakened it. Unexpectedly, Shi Qianhan had awakened it too. Hearing that, Xie Feiyu's body trembled slightly, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead uncontrollably. Old Fu was also a martial ancestor, but he died in an instant under Shi Qianhan's divinity. If it was him, Shi Qianhan did not say a word and walked toward Xie Feiyu step by step. The latter was terrified and subconsciously retreated. Young man from the Shi family, let people go when possible. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly exploded in the void. Then, a black-clothed old man suddenly walked out of the void and landed beside Xie Feiyu. As he appeared, the pressure in this world suddenly increased by a lot. Third grandfather! Xie Feiyu was delighted. Someone cried out involuntarily, "It's one of the 5 supreme elders of the Painted Sound sect, Xie Xuanjia." As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Even Mu Caiwei's cold expression changed. Although the Painted Sound sect was currently a 7th-grade sect, there were 5 grand elders in the sect, and these 5 were all martial kings. It was rumored that the first elder had already touched the threshold of the martial saint realm, and could break through at any time. Greetings, fellow Taoists Xie. The 3 elders of the Spirit Ruin Cave cupped their fists at the same time. Xie Xuanjia stared at Shi Qianhan with a gloomy gaze. "Shi family's junior, are you thinking of killing the successor of my Painting Sound sect? Martial King?" Shi Qianhan smiled slightly and seemed to be disdainful. "Your Painting Sound sect is only a 7th-grade sect. Do you dare to provoke my Shi clan?" Xie Xuanjia was enraged. At this time, Elder Liang of the Kunwa Holy Land said, "Young Lord Shi, in the end, there is no hatred between you and young Master Xie. Why do you have to be so extreme?" "That's right. To tell you the truth, young Master Xie has already been accepted as a disciple by a supreme elder of our Spirit Ruins Utopia." Elder One of the Spirit Ruins Utopia said. As soon as he said that, everyone's expression changed, and they looked at Xie Feiyu in disbelief. Xie Feiyu was actually accepted as a disciple by a supreme elder of the Spirit Ruins Utopia? One must know that anyone who could become the supreme elder of the spiritual ruin paradise must be a legendary martial saint. What? Do you really think that I would lower myself to deal with a piece of trash? Meeting everyone's gazes, Shi Qianhan smiled, and then he looked at Xie Feiyu and said, "Don't worry, even though you're already a dead man in my eyes, I won't attack you." At this point, his gaze turned cold. "Because someone will come to take your life sooner or later. If you dare to touch his woman, not only will you die, but even the Painted Sound sect behind you will be destroyed because of you." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place was silent. Xie Feiyu smiled coldly. "Not only does someone want to take my life, he also wants to destroy my Painted Sound sect? I'm suddenly interested in the person that young Master Shi mentioned. May I know his name?" Xie Feiyu was the #1 martial ancestor, and he had the grade 7 Painted Sound sect and the Spirit Ruins Utopia behind him. Who would dare to kill him? Moreover, the Painted Sound sect had 5 martial kings. If the 4 super forces did not make a move, who could destroy it? "Shut up." Shi Qianhan frowned and said bluntly, "Do you think you're worthy of knowing that person's name? If he comes, killing you will be as easy as killing a chicken." As soon as he finished speaking, Mu Caiwei, who had been silent all this while, was stunned. Then, she seemed to have thought of something, and her delicate body trembled. She looked at Shi Qianhan again with excitement in her eyes. "You dare to touch his woman. Not only will you die, but even the Painted Sound sect behind you will be destroyed because of you." His woman? Him? Mu Caiwei looked at Shi Qianhan with trembling eyes, and her mind rumbled. Is it him? Killing me will be as easy as killing a chicken? Xie Feiyu laughed out loud. I'm getting more and more curious about who young Master Shi is talking about. I'll wait for him. I just hope he won't disappoint me too much. If he can come, you'll naturally know what he's capable of. Shi Qianhan's voice was cold. He had come to the Tianfeng Sea area this time to suppress Mu Kaiwei, but the most important reason was because Old Man Shao had done a divination. The divination showed that the person he was waiting for had already arrived in the ancient barren world and would definitely come to the Tianfeng Sea area. As soon as he finished speaking, an old voice suddenly sounded from the ground. I also want to see if the person you're talking about can come. The voice seemed extremely calm, but the moment it sounded, it stirred the hearts of everyone present. It was as if the divine might was like a prison, making people want to kneel on the ground. In the next moment, a figure gradually appeared under the distortion of the void. The figure was wearing a green robe. He looked middle-aged, but his body exuded a thick aura of lethargy. His gaze was deep, making people feel unfathomable, even though there was no aura coming from him. However, just the rhythm of his breathing made everyone present feel endless pressure, as if they were facing a god. Elder One from the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven revealed a look of joy, then knelt down respectfully. Disciple welcomes the arrival of the Grand Elder. Even Xie Feiyu knelt heavily on the ground and said word by word, Disciple welcomes the arrival of Master. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:20. Greetings, Senior He. At this moment, the two elders from the Kunwu Holy Land and the Extreme Purity Palace, as well as the masters of the Painted Sound School and the other forces present, all knelt down. Suddenly, a bolt from the blue flashed through Mu Caiwei's mind, and extreme waves surged on her face. Grand Elder! Master! The person who came was actually the Supreme Elder of the Spirit Ruin Paradise, one of the four overlords. He was a god who stood at the peak of the entire Heaven Wind Sea area. Martial Saint. The legendary Martial Saint Master. Shi Qianhan's expression also changed, and the dozen or so knights behind him protected him tightly. Shi Qianhan's eyes flickered a few times as he signaled his subordinates to retreat. Then, he cupped his fists towards the green-robed elder. Greetings, Senior He. Whether it was in terms of strength or status, even in the Shi family of the Eastern Wasteland, this person was at the level of a patriarch. Therefore, he did not dare to be careless. At least you have some manners. The elder in the green robe glanced at him expressionlessly, then looked at Xie Feiyu. Since the young generation of the Shi family said that the person could kill you like killing a chicken, and he even dared to destroy your painting sound school, then just take it. I am also curious if there is such a person. Yes, Master. Xie Feiyu nodded heavily, but he felt extremely delighted in his heart. Didn't you, Shi Qianhan, use your identity as a member of the Eastern Wilderness Shi family to suppress me? Now that my master is here, aren't you going to die as well? He even had the audacity to say that someone would kill him like killing a chicken. Not to mention that there was no such person, even if there was, with Master present, who would dare. Shi Qianhan's gaze was gloomy. How could he not understand the meaning behind the green-robed old man's words? However, he did not regret it, because he trusted that person. Seeing that things had escalated to this point, Mu Kaiwei bit her lips tightly and said with incomparable determination, This has nothing to do with young Master Shi. It's all because of my King Mu fort. She did not want to implicate Shi Qianhan. However, before she could finish speaking, the green-robed elder suddenly looked at her. Just one look. Mu Kaiwei only felt her entire body tremble. Her sea of consciousness was in extreme pain. Her body trembled violently, and she uncontrollably took a few steps back. Then, she spat out a mouthful of blood and her face was extremely pale. The green-robed old man was expressionless. Since when was it a place for a little girl like you to speak? Jiao hurried over to support her. King Mu's expression was extremely indignant. The Painted Sound sect was bullying his daughter. Xie Feiyu bullied his daughter. The experts of the three sects attacked shamelessly. He hated it. He hated himself for not being able to protect his daughter. Mu Kaiwei bit her red lips tightly, allowing the dark red blood to flow out from the corner of her mouth. Her expression was extremely resolute. Shi Qianhan looked straight at the green-robed old man. Senior he, you're a patriarch after all. Isn't it beneath you to lower yourself to attack a junior? At this point, his gaze became extremely cold. Miss Mu is my friend. If you continue to attack her, don't blame the Shi family's patriarch for crossing over to ask for an explanation. The green-robed old man's pupils shrank slightly. With a cold snort, his figure disappeared on the spot. After this incident, the surrounding people looked at each other, not daring to make the slightest sound. After a long while, Elder One from the Spirit Ruin Utopia stood up and said, "Everyone, it's getting late. The next round of the competition should begin." After saying that, he could not help but look at Xie Feiyu and Mu Kaiwei. "Young Master Xie, Miss Mu, do the two of you want to continue the competition?" Although that was what he said, his gaze was fixed on Mu Kaiwei. After all, the latter was already injured. "I don't mind," Xie Feiyu grinned and looked at Mu Kaiwei. "Miss Mu, it's not too late for your King Mu fort to give up now. Once you're on stage, I won't show mercy." Earlier, he did not dare to have any thoughts about Mu Kaiwei because of Shi Qianhan's appearance. However, after the Spirit Ruin Utopia's Supreme Elder appeared, he no longer had any fear in his heart. In fact, he could not wait for Shi Qianhan to attack him. As soon as that was said, everyone present turned their gazes to Mu Kaiwei. King Mu looked at his dispirited daughter and was on the verge of tears. "Kaiwei, give up. I'm begging you. I don't want anything. Let's go home." How could he not know that even if his daughter was at her peak, she would probably not be Xie Feiyu's match? Moreover, his daughter had been injured by the Spirit Ruin Utopia's Supreme Elder. She did not have much strength left. "That's right, miss. Let's go back. At most, we'll come back in 5 years." Jior cried as well. The little girl's eyes were red, and her voice made one's heart ache. "No." Mu Kaiwei took a deep breath in and forced herself to stand up. Then, she looked at Elder Tian Tian with a firm gaze. "Elder One, I want to participate." She knew very well what she was going to face next, but she had no room to give up. In order to deal with the King Mu fort, the Great Li dynasty had already caused the fort's subordinates to be divided. Once the news of her admitting defeat in the 100-sect competition spread, the King Mu fort would definitely face a situation of collapse. Therefore, she could not give up. "All right." Elder One from the Spirit Ruin Utopia took a deep look at her before saying coldly, "All right, all of you can go up now." Xie Feiyu laughed mockingly. His figure flickered, and then he shot toward a huge fighting ring in front of him. "Miss!" Jior gripped Mu Kaiwei tightly. Mu Kaiwei gritted her teeth and squeezed out a smile on her pale face. Then, her figure landed on the arena like a butterfly. "This woman is quite determined," the middle-aged beauty from the Great Purity Palace sighed faintly. If it was before, the Great Purity Palace might have considered accepting her. "Unfortunately, we've offended the Spirit Ruin Utopia." Shi Qianhan did not say a word. If Xie Feiyu dared to do anything to harm Mu Kaiwei, he would not mind killing him. Even if the Grand Elder of the Spirit Ruin Utopia made a move, he would not be afraid. At most, he would crush the talisman and summon the Shi family's patriarch from afar. As the two of them entered the arena, the tens of thousands of people present turned their gazes over, and the world fell silent. On the arena, Xie Feiyu looked at Mu Kaiwei, who was 300 meters away, with a mocking expression. He grinned sinisterly. "Miss Mu, you better hope that the person Shi Qianhan mentioned will come. Otherwise, no one will be able to save you today." Mu Kaiwei's face was pale. As if she did not hear him, she slowly raised her hand and cupped her fists at him from afar. "Fellow Xie, please enlighten me." "Very good." Xie Feiyu's gaze turned cold. Rumble, berserk, profound chi erupted from his body, stirring up a storm on the 1,000-foot-wide stone platform. Just a trace of the energy that was released caused many people's expressions to change. Mu Kaiwei smiled bitterly, but her expression was still incomparably resolute. Then, she took a few light steps and took the initiative to attack Xiefeiyu like a swift. "You're courting death." Xiefeiyu stretched out his hand, and a green cyclone condensed in his palm. Then, it grew larger and larger, and in the end there were actually runes surging. Just as he wanted to make more moves, he suddenly realized that the green cyclone in his hand had left his hand and was drawn into the void uncontrollably. At that moment, Xiefeiyu was stunned, and then he raised his head to look at the void in disbelief. At that moment, many people present suddenly raised their heads to look at the sky. That was because there was suddenly an invisible pressure descending from the void. The pressure seemed to be able to collapse the sky, and the more profound one's cultivation was, the more fearful they were. Rumble. At that moment, under everyone's shocked gazes, a purple thunderbolt suddenly appeared in the silent void, and then it caused tens of thousands of thunderbolts to rumble at the same time. In an instant, dark clouds covered the sky, and the weather changed. Countless purple lightning snakes quickly condensed in the void. From afar, it looked like a purple electric net had covered the entire sky. Boom! As more and more thunderclouds gathered, in the end it seemed to be unable to bear the weight and exploded, as if it had triggered the wrath of the heavens and the people. In the lightning that filled the sky, a thin figure slowly appeared, as if he was a god born from the lightning tribulation. The figure had a head of white hair, and his eyes were like two bolts of lightning. He walked over slowly with a little girl in his arms. Wherever he passed, the clouds disappeared, the rain dispersed, the lightning made way, the void collapsed, and the world was subdued. At that moment, Mu Tsaiwei's delicate body trembled violently, and a trace of moisture appeared in her beautiful eyes. He's here. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:21. It's him, it's really him. Mu Kaiwei stared blankly at the thin figure that was slowly walking over from the endless lightning in the sky. Two streams of hot tears rolled down from the corners of her eyes. She looked at the familiar figure that she had parted with a year ago and watched him walk over on the thunderclouds a year later. She bit her red lips tightly while more and more clear tears gathered on her face. It seemed like all the yearning that had accumulated in her heart during this past year and all the grievances she'd suffered earlier were pouring out like a torrent at this moment. He was here. He was draped in the sky, stepping on the ground and bathed in lightning. He was here. Brother Yi, it's really you. Shi Qianhan looked at the skinny figure that was getting closer and closer in shock. Apart from being shocked, he was even more excited. He could not help but recall the scenes from when he met Yi Chen to getting to know him. However, a strong sense of guilt surged in his eyes soon after. He, Shi Qianhan, had lived for Yu for the first half of his life. He had experienced betrayal and betrayed others. He was enemies with his master and everyone in the world, but he treated Yi Chen as a friend. However, he chose to betray and sell out his friend. He even fought them. He would never forget how he was threatened by Xiao Yuanjing from the Kunlun ruins, Xiao family, and attacked Yi Chen on the ghost ship. He owed Yi Chen. Even on the ghost ship, he had pulled Xiao Yuanjing, who wanted to escape, and his flesh and blood were devoured by the strange black fog before he died. He still felt that he could not make it up to Yi Chen. Young master, is it young master? Jiu rubbed her eyes and looked at the sky in disbelief. Various expressions appeared on Xiao Hua's face, which had just cried. King Mu revealed an expression as if he had seen a ghost. He could not help but pinch himself and suck in a breath of cold air. It's really that brat? At this moment they were not the only ones. Even the tens of thousands of people present, including Elder Tian Tian and the rest of the Spirit Ruin Cave, were shocked. Elder Tian Tian's pupils constricted violently as he stared fixedly at the figure in the sky. He was a peak martial king, but he realized that he could not see through that figure. All the hair on Elder Liang's body stood on end. He didn't know why, but when that figure appeared in the sky, a bone-piercing chill swept through his entire body. At this moment, the entire Tianxian mountain, regardless of whether it was a low-level martial artist or a high-level martial artist, was shocked by that figure. Xie Feiyu, who was less than 100 feet away from Mu Kaiwei, stared blankly at the figure in the sky. Then, he noticed Shi Qianhan and Mu Caiwei's reactions. He suddenly shuddered. A chill that made one's hair stand on end emerged from his heart, and this chill nearly caused his soul to scatter. There's actually such a person? He had originally thought that the person Shi Qianhan had mentioned was fake, but the scene before him forced him to believe it. I'm definitely not a match for such a person. Shi Qianhan was right, killing me is as easy as killing a chicken. He was trembling with fear and terror, especially when he thought about how he had teased Mu Kaiwei earlier and even shamelessly threatened the King Mu fort. He was scared out of his wits. Boom, with a loud bang, everyone was jolted awake from their daze, and the thunderclouds in the sky completely dispersed. Under everyone's gaze, the white-haired young man slowly descended with the child in his arms. In the end, he landed next to the beautiful figure. The white-haired young man was Yi Chen. Yi Chen looked at Mu Kaiwei, whose eyes were already blurry with tears. There was an apologetic look in his eyes as he said softly, "I'm sorry, I'm late." Mu Kaiwei subconsciously wanted to jump into his arms, but she realized that he was carrying a 5- or 6-year-old girl. The little girl was currently staring at her with her dark eyes wide open. Her facial features were 60% to 70% similar to the former. Mu Kaiwei seemed to have thought of something, and her heart suddenly ached for no reason. Her face that was flushed from excitement instantly turned pale, and she almost lost her balance. Child, he actually had a child. Her shoulders trembled non-stop. A few seconds later, she took a deep breath in and revealed a pale smile. Not late at all, young master. Just when Yi Chen was about to speak, a fragrant wind suddenly blew over. Subsequently, a soft yet elastic body threw itself into his arms and hugged him tightly. Young master, you're finally back. I knew you wouldn't forget Jiu and young mistress, sob. Jiu hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was like a little girl who had been wronged as she sobbed loudly. As the little girl cried, she wiped her tears and snot on his sleeve. Yi Chen's expression stiffened when he sensed the sturdiness coming from his body. He wanted to push her away, but he could not bear to in the end. After not seeing her for a year, this girl had grown up. King Mu stood at the side and watched from afar. His expression was extremely complicated. Until now, he still could not accept that Yi Chen had returned in such a manner. Seeing Jiu hugging that brat, he could not help but look at his daughter before him and sigh softly. How could he not see Mengmeng, who was in Yi Chen's arms? The father and daughter were almost the same regardless of their expressions or facial features. Sigh. He shook his head secretly and turned his face away. He could not bear to see his daughter's beautiful face. His daughter had waited for this brat for more than a year. Although she had waited for him, the outcome was not satisfactory. Her ignored the gazes of the others and cried sadly, "Young master, I miss you so much. Do you know, hey, who are you?" At that moment, Mengmeng, who was in Yi Chen's embrace, was a little upset. She could not help but curse. "Not only did you take advantage of my daddy, you even rubbed your snot on my daddy." Only then did Jiu react. She raised her head and looked at the little girl who was glaring at her. For a moment, she could not react. "What are you looking at? I'm talking about you. You're already an adult, yet you're still crying. Aren't you ashamed?" The little girl had an unfriendly expression. "Bad sister. Not only did you squeeze me until I couldn't breathe, you even rubbed your snot on me." "Young master, who is this little girl? She's quite arrogant. Let's see if I—" Jiu was furious as well. She rolled up her sleeves and was about to fly into a rage. Subsequently, she seemed to have thought of something and looked at Yi Chen in disbelief. "Why, young master, can she be wire?" Yi Chen nodded lightly when he met her gaze. He then looked at King Mu beside him and said with a smile, "Fort Master Mu, how have you been?" King Mu's smile was a little unnatural as he said, "Mr. Yi, how have you been?" In reality, he hoped that Yi Chen would call him father-in-law. However, that was clearly an extravagant hope. Yi Chen smiled lightly. However, he was stunned as he stared at a figure in the southeast corner. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:22. Yi Chen looked at Shi Qianhan quietly. Shi Qianhan looked at him as well. There was no verbal exchange between the two of them. They only stared at each other. A few seconds later, the latter said, "Brother Yi, I didn't expect to meet you here." The place he was referring to was not the Tianfeng Sea area, but the entire ancient, desolate realm. It was because he and Yi Chen had a common secret. They were not from the ancient, desolate realm, but from Earth, which was known as the Celestial Burial Planet. Yi Chen said slowly, "I didn't expect you to be alive and meet you here." Yes, even he was surprised to see Shi Qianhan here. On the ghost ship, he had learned that after Shi Qianhan and Luo Tianya attacked him together, Shi Qianhan had gone crazy and dragged Xiao Yuanjing into the black fog. He knew very well that the strange black fog could devour a person's flesh and blood. Therefore, in his opinion, Shi Qianhan should be dead. Who would have thought that they would meet here? Even though his tone was extremely calm, to Shi Qianhan, it sounded like he was 1,000 miles away. The latter took a deep breath in and smiled bitterly. "Brother Yi, I've let you down, we'll talk about this later." Yi Chen interrupted him and squinted at Mu Kaiwei. "Tell me, who injured you?" As soon as he landed, he sensed that the latter was injured. The golden core in his body was on the verge of shattering, and his divine sense was severely injured. The reason why the latter was still standing was purely because he was struggling to hold on. Mu Kaiwei looked at him quietly, holding back her tears. "I hurt myself." Before Yi Chen appeared, she had been looking forward to his appearance. However, after Yi Chen really appeared, she did not dare let Yi Chen interfere with the grudge. Seemingly sensing her concerns, Yi Chen did not force her. Instead, he lifted his head to look at Shi Qianhan. "Brother Shi, please tell me." Shi Qianhan looked at him deeply. Then, he pointed at Xiefeiyu, who was standing on the stage, and said coldly, "Brother Yi, it's all because of this person." This person relied on the fact that he was from the Grade 7 sect, Painting Sound sect, to tease Ms. Mu. Then, he lured out the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven's Supreme Elder, He Jiming. The Supreme Elder of the Spirit Ruins Utopia lowered his status to heavily injure Miss Mu. Yi Chen then looked at Xiefeiyu, who was on the Grand Supreme Court. His eyes turned cold as he took a step out. He charged at the latter at lightning speed. At that moment, Xiefeiyu's expression changed drastically. He used all his strength to urge his body to retreat. Not good. Two experts from the Painted Sound sect instantly took action. They grabbed Xiefeiyu and were about to use their escape technique to escape. However, they were shocked to discover that the space around them had been sealed. The Grand Elder of the Painted Sound sect, Xie Xuanjia, took a step forward as if he wanted to stop Yi Chen. "Fellow, let's talk nicely, get lost." Yi Chen waved his sleeve. Countless bolts of lightning exploded in the air. Then, they turned into a lightning dragon that pierced through the former. Boom! As the deafening sound rang out, some people immediately discovered that Xie Xuanjia's body had instantly crumbled into dust. Yi Chen did not stop walking. He continued running towards Xiefeiyu, who was being carried by the two elders of the Painted Sound sect. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and his gaze was like two sharp heavenly swords. Every step he took made everyone's hearts tremble. A martial king died on the spot. "Supreme Sect, save me, save me!" The two Painted Sound sect's elders, who carried Xiefeiyu and retreated, roared hysterically. Elder One from the Spirit Ruins Utopia finally reacted. He clasped his fists at Yi Chen solemnly and moved his lips slightly. "Senior, please give face to the Spirit Ruins Utopia." Before he could finish speaking, He met Yi Chen's cold gaze. "I don't care who you are. If you dare to stop me from killing, you'll die too." Elder Wen's heart trembled endlessly. In the end, he retracted his foot that was about to step out. He did not dare. Xie Xuanjia from the Painted Sound sect was not weaker than him, but he was as weak as an ant in this person's hands. He completely realized that if he forcefully stood up again, his outcome would probably be no different from the former. Elder Wen's retreat caused an uproar, causing Xie Feiyu and the rest to fall into complete despair. The eyes of the two elders who were carrying Xie Feiyu were bloodshot. "How dare you kill someone from the Painted Sound sect? You'll definitely die." Then, they charged at Yi Chen together. Yi Chen slapped with his palm. He broke through the sky with one hand and shook the void. He whistled as he charged. The two of them turned into a bloody mist on the spot. Only Xie Feiyu stood there in a daze, his entire body trembling. It was too terrifying. Suddenly, he shuddered and said with trembling lips, "No, I'm a genius. I'm the disciple of the Spirit Ruins Utopia's Supreme Elder. You can't kill me. There are no exceptions to the people I want to kill." Yi Chen charged over. His fist shone with a golden gleam and directly destroyed his soul and body. The world fell into dead silence at this moment. On the surrounding stone platforms, tens of thousands of people from the sects looked at the figure in shock. Shock, endless shock. It had only been the time it took for an incense stick to burn since Yi Chen arrived, but he had killed 4 people consecutively. They were a martial king and 3 martial ancestors. How could they not be shocked? At this moment, Shi Qianhan's words rang in everyone's minds again. "If he descends, killing you, Xie Feiyu, will be as easy as killing a chicken." It turned out that Shi Qianhan was not exaggerating at all. Martial saint, this person must be a martial saint. Everyone's heart was filled with shock. Such a young martial saint could be said to be unprecedented. With this person as the King Mu Fort's backer, who would dare to offend the King Mu Fort? Meanwhile, Mu Kaiwei, Juror, and the rest were completely stunned. They did not expect Yi Chen to be so powerful now. One had to know that Yi Chen had passed the emperor tribulations and become a martial emperor a year ago. It had only been a year, yet his strength had skyrocketed to such a level? Shi Qianhan was shocked as well. He still remembered that when he parted ways with Yi Chen on the ghost ship, Yi Chen was only a pseudo-emperor. After that, he came to the ancient Desolate Realm by chance and joined the Shi family of the Eastern Desolate Realm's ancient clan. He had many fortuitous encounters. More than once, he had fantasized that he might leave Yi Chen behind. However, the scene before his eyes caused him to lose even the slightest bit of confidence in his heart. There was only dense shock. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen turned around and walked toward Elder Tian Tian of the Spirit Ruin Cave. Even though his expression was extremely calm, the murderous aura on his body did not seem to have completely dissipated. As senior, Elder Tian Tian's face was extremely pale, and he could not help but bend down. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:23. Yi Chen's footsteps were not fast, but every step he took seemed to be stepping on Elder Tian's heart. The latter was extremely terrified. Even though he was a martial king and was considered a peerless expert in this world. However, under Yi Chen's aura, he could not think of resisting at all. Especially after witnessing Yi Chen kill 4 people consecutively, he almost fainted. Beside Elder Wen, Elder Liang from the Kunwu Holy Land and Elder Ling from the Sky Purity Palace subconsciously shifted their feet. Both of their faces were filled with shock. The reason being the feeling that Yi Chen gave them was something that they could only experience when they were facing the Almighties in the sect. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen walked to Elder One and said, "How dare your Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven hurt my old friend?" Buzz, Elder Wen's mind exploded, and he fell to the ground in panic. "Senior, it's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding." If he had known that there was a terrifying existence like Yi Chen behind the King Mu Fort, He believed that no one present would dare to provoke the King Mu Fort, let alone Mu Kaiwei. Moreover, the person who injured Mu Kaiwei was the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven's Supreme Elder. Even he could not stop him. Yi Chen retracted his killing intent and looked at him coldly. I'll give you a chance. Summon your Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven's Supreme Elder. Everyone was shocked by his words. One had to know that the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven's Supreme Elder, He Jiming, was a martial saint. Looking at Yi Chen's expression now, it was obvious that he wanted to settle the score with the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven? All right. Elder One heaved a sigh of relief when he sensed that his killing intent was gone. He did not dare to hesitate and immediately took out the Sex Summoning Talisman in an attempt to summon the Supreme Elder. However, there was no movement in the air after he sacrificed the summoning talisman. Sensing the coldness in Yi Chen's gaze, Elder One trembled and took out another summoning talisman. The result was the same. The summoning talisman that had never failed in the past had lost its effect. Elder Wen's heart sank completely. He knew very well that there was nothing wrong with the summoning talisman. The problem was that the Supreme Elder was unwilling to come. Why was he unwilling? It was obvious that even the Grand Elder was afraid of this person and didn't dare to show himself. When he thought up to this point, his figure shook heavily, and then his lips trembled as he said, "Say, Senior, I have no other way." Yi Chen's eyes flickered a few times. He then walked to Mu Tsaiwei's side slowly. With a wave of his sleeve, a bottle of medicinal pills landed in the latter's hand. "Take it and recover from your injuries." Before Mu Kaiwei could speak, he said again, "Don't worry. With me here today, no one in your King Mu Fort will dare to touch me. In this so-called 100-sect competition, I'll make your King Mu Fort sweep through the 100 sects. Be it grade 6, grade 7, or grade 8 sects, all of them will kneel at your feet." With that, he turned around and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd. "Next, I'll represent the King Mu Fort in the battle and challenge all the grade 7, grade 8, and even grade 9 sects." An indifferent and extremely arrogant voice slowly came out of his mouth. "Are you going to attack me one by one or all at once?" As soon as he finished speaking, the world became deathly silent. No one dared to speak, and no one even dared to meet his gaze. In an instant, tens of thousands of people lowered their heads uncontrollably. Even the 3 high-sect elders of the Spirit Ruins Paradise, Kunwu Holy Land, and Tai Ching Palace did not say a word. Killing the Painted Sound Sect's Supreme Elder, Xie Xuanjia, was as easy as crushing an ant. The 3 martial ancestors were unable to resist him at all. The elders of the 3 sects did not even dare to breathe loudly. Even the Supreme Elder of the Spirit Ruins Paradise did not dare to show himself. Such methods and such slaughter were like the descent of a god of death. Who would dare to be unconvinced? Mu Tsaiwei's eyes were filled with tears as she stared blankly at the figure with his back facing her. "Don't worry. With me here today, no one in your King Mu Fort will dare to touch me." These seemingly arrogant words were like a great bell ringing incessantly in his mind. At this moment she smiled. Just this sentence alone made her feel that her wait of more than a year was worth it. This man had come when she was at her most difficult, when she was at her most desperate. This man had killed 4 people in an extremely domineering manner to regain her dignity. It was also this man who had single-handedly suppressed all the powerhouses of the 100 sects present. However, his hair had turned white. In the end, her gaze landed on Yi Chen's white hair. A hint of heartache suddenly flashed through her beautiful eyes. Even though Yi Chen did not say anything, she could vaguely guess that Yi Chen must have experienced something during his disappearance for more than a year. This brat, apart from being shocked, King Mu sighed with emotion. He could not help but recall the cold young man from more than a year ago. "Why, young master is getting more and more handsome." Jior held her flushed face with both hands. Her eyes were filled with admiration when she looked at Yi Chen. Shi Qianhan, who was next to her, did not know whether to laugh or cry when he heard that. He could not help but tease, "Am I not handsome? You?" Jiu rolled her eyes at him and said snappily, "You're not as handsome as young master. In my eyes, young master is the most handsome man in the world." The smile on Shi Qianhan's face froze. "Are you guys going to attack me one by one, or are you going to attack me together?" Yi Chen's cold voice was still echoing in the air. It was like rolling thunder that did not stop. "Fellow, your might is monstrous. Not to mention our Tianfeng Sea area, even in the entire ancient desolate realm, there aren't many people who can go against you. It's best that you don't make things difficult for these juniors." Amidst the silence, an aged voice slowly resounded from the void. As the void was torn apart, a slightly hunched old figure slowly appeared. As this person appeared, the sound of tens of thousands of swords suddenly rang out. It was an old man in linen clothes. He looked extremely hunched, but when he stood there, he was like a sharp sword that could be unsheathed at any time. Patriarch! Elder Liang from the Kunwa Holy Land was overjoyed. As soon as those words were spoken, the originally quiet crowd burst into an uproar. Kunwa Holy Land's Supreme Patriarch, Sword Master Jiang. Not long after the old man appeared, the space from before started to tremble again, and an invisible fragrance followed. Fellow Jiuyang is right. This fellow has stepped into the martial saint stage at such a young age. It truly makes me feel ashamed. As a flirtatious voice rang out, a purple lotus flower slowly bloomed in the void. A few seconds later, a beautiful woman in a colorful dress appeared from within the purple lotus. She stood barefoot in the air, and her beauty was breathtaking. "Greetings, Palace Master." The beautiful woman from the Great Purity Palace bowed and cupped her fists. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:24. It's the Palace Lord of the Great Purity Palace, Fairy Taiching. The heavens and the earth were once again in an uproar, and the eyes of countless people surged with extreme waves of shock. No wonder they were so shocked. Regardless of whether it was the nine-yang sword head of the Kunwa Holy Ground or the Palace Lord of the Great Purity Palace, Fairy Taiching, all of them were the overlords of the Heaven-Wind Sea region. They each controlled an area and were like the gods of the nine heavens, suppressing the entire Heaven-Wind Sea region. Yes, to all mortals and even to all cultivators they were God. However, these two terrifying existences had appeared at the same time. Moreover, they were here for Yi Chen. At that moment, even Shi Qianhan's expression turned solemn. This was because the person who had come was not any weaker than the patriarch of the Eastern Wilderness Shi family. Even he was like this, let alone Mu Kaiwei, King Mu, and the others. They all looked nervous. Yi Chen lifted his eyes to look at the two of them. He squinted slightly as battle intent gradually surged from his body. Ever since he came to the ancient barren world, he had killed everyone from grandmaster martial artists to martial kings. However, he had never fought a martial king before. "He doesn't mind trying?" As if sensing Lin Yun's hostility, the Nine Sun Sword's head slowly descended and faintly smiled. "Fellow Taoist, we don't have any ill intentions." "Not bad." The Great Purity Palace's palace master's smoke flowed as he said, "The two of us have only come for two things. The first is to help the King move fort." "Help the King move fort?" Yi Chen frowned. He could sense that there was no enmity between the two of them, but what did they mean by help? "The reason why my East Ocean is holding the 100-sect competition is to select the sects with potential, so that they can obtain our protection," the Nine-Yang sword leader spoke confidently, his gaze wandering around Mu Kaiwei and the rest. "I believe the King Mu Fort is here for this as well." Mu Kaiwei remained silent. In the end, the Nine-Yang sword head looked at Yi Chen and said again, "However, the King Mu Fort has an almighty like you now. I believe no one will dare to object to you being ranked first in the 100-sect competition this time. Therefore, we've decided that after this matter, the King Mu Fort can become the fifth overlord of the Tianfeng Sea area." The palace master of the Supreme Purity Palace chuckled softly. As her voice fell, the whole place was silent. Tens of thousands of people fell into a dead silence. All of them were shocked by the terrifying information contained in these words. Want to make the king move Fort the fifth overlord? In the entire Tianfeng Sea area and the East Sea, there had only been 4 overlords since ancient times. They were the Dali dynasty, the spiritual ruin paradise, the Taiqing Palace, and the Kunwu Holy Land. For thousands of years, no one had been able to break this balance. However, the King Mu Fort had done it now, and it had even been acknowledged by the 2 overlords of the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven and the Supreme Purity Palace. Did this not mean that Yi Chen's ability had reached a level where the 2 overlords had no choice but to acknowledge him? Even Mu Kaiwei and the others were stunned. They had never thought that such a day would come. Before this, they only wanted to become a 7th-grade sect. Yi Chen's expression remained unchanged in the dead silence. He said coldly, "What's the second thing?" The 9-yang sword leader and the Supreme Purity Palace lord looked at each other, and then the former said to the void, "Fellow Taoist he, come out." The air was silent for a few seconds, and then it began to distort violently. Finally, a green-robed Taoist appeared. This person was the person who had lowered his status to injure Mu Kaiwei, the supreme elder of the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven, He Jiming, who called himself the Patriarch of the Spirit Ruins. Yi Chen's eyes turned cold when he saw who it was. If he remembered correctly, Shi Qianhan had said earlier that this person was the one who bullied Mu Kaiwei with his status. He thought that the other party would not show himself, but he did not expect him to show himself now. "Fellow Taoist." The 9-yang sword leader stroked his beard and smiled. "This is fellow Taoist he from the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven. The second reason why Grand Pure One and I are here is related to fellow Taoist he. Fellow Taoist, he had some misunderstanding with the King Mu Fort earlier. I hope that the 2 of you can bury the hatchet," the Grand Pure One Palace Lord said. When everyone heard that, they immediately came to a realization. No wonder the 9-yang sword leader and the Grand Pure One Palace Lord came together. It turned out that they wanted to be a peacemaker. Immediately after, their hearts were filled with shock. It seemed like He Jiming from the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven was unwilling to become enemies with Yi Chen. Did that not mean that Yi Chen was already on equal footing with the 3 overlords? As soon as that thought appeared, many people could not help but inhale sharply. Yi Chen's appearance was much younger than the 9-yang sword leader and the rest. Following the Grand Pure One Palace Master's words, the Spirit Ruins Patriarch of the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven looked at Yi Chen and said expressionlessly, "Fellow, I admit that there was some misunderstanding with the King Mu Fort earlier." Misunderstanding. Before he could finish, Yi Chen interrupted him coldly. "Your disciple didn't respect etiquette. He teased and threatened my old friend. As his master, not only did you not teach him a good lesson, you even used your status to attack my old friend. Now, you're telling me that this is a misunderstanding? Isn't that too ridiculous?" Yi Chen squinted as he spoke to this point. There was a hint of mockery in his eyes. The entire place fell silent. Yi Chen was unwilling to shake hands with the Spirit Ruins Patriarch and make peace with him? The 9-yang sword leader and the Grand Pure One Palace Master secretly frowned, feeling slightly displeased. The Spirit Ruins Patriarch's expression turned grim, and then he said coldly, "Didn't you kill my disciple, Xiafeiyu?" To him, he was already giving Yi Chen face by taking the initiative to express his goodwill. However, Yi Chen did not accept it? That's because he deserves to die. Yi Chen scoffed and said mockingly, "A piece of trash like you deserves to die for daring to speak rudely to my people." Bastard! The Patriarch of Spirit Ruins was furious. Clearly, he did not expect him to be so protective. "I'm injured. What are you going to do about it?" "What should I do?" Yi Chen stood proudly and said noncommittally, "If you apologize to Ms. Mu now, I might consider letting this matter go. Otherwise, an eye for an eye." With that, he took a step forward, and a tornado-like storm was set off in the void. Killing intent filled the sky. Everyone's expression changed. Never had he thought that Yi Chen would be so protective of his people. He was also so arrogant and domineering. Ah! Patriarch Spirit Ruins was so angry that he laughed. You want me to apologize to an ant? You're still boasting shamelessly. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? He was the patriarch of the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven and one of the few martial saints in the Tianfeng Sea area. Since when did he need to apologize to anyone? Fellow, you can't. The Grand Pure One Palace Master and the 9 Yang Sword Leader spoke at the same time, as if they wanted to dissuade him. Very well. Yi Chen chuckled softly. His voice was extremely calm. Since you like to bully others, why don't I do the same today? End of this chapter. Chapter 11:25. Since that's the case, let's fight. When he spat out the last word, the heavens and earth rumbled at the same time. A purple energy that pierced through heaven and earth erupted from his body and traversed the sky. Yi Chen held the purple energy in his hand, and the weather changed. I'll move unhindered with the sword in my hand. I'll exchange the white light for the blood light. The sword was 7 feet long and 3 inches wide. Lightning overflowed in all directions, emitting a dazzling brilliance. It was the true martial thousand lightning sword. Old dog, try taking my sword. Boom! The moment Yi Chen swung his sword, purple lightning exploded on his body, and heaven and earth rumbled. Then, it turned into thousands of lightning bolts that connected heaven and earth, replacing all light in the world. There was no sword chi under this strike, but there were countless thunderclaps that were enough to shatter eardrums roaring in the sky. At that moment, everyone raised their heads and stared blankly at the terrifying scene in the sky. In the sky, a monstrous sword gleam that was nearly 300 meters long soared into the sky. Then, it turned into thousands of sword gleams that surged, as if it had turned into a monstrous sword river with thousands of lightning bolts. What sword is this? Countless people were shocked. Even the 9 Yang Sword Leader's expression changed. He had cultivated the sword all his life, and he thought that he was invincible in the sword Dao. However, he felt a devastating sword intent from Yi Chen's sword strike. Purple Heaven Divine Lightning? The Grand Purity Palace's palace master's pupils constricted violently. She was glad that she and the others did not attack Yi Chen as soon as they appeared. Even she did not dare to say that she was confident in taking Yi Chen's sword strike. The Spirit Ruins Patriarch lifted his eyes abruptly. The sword gleam in the sky was reflected in his eyes, and his expression turned extremely grim. This sword strike was indeed terrifying. However, it was impossible for him to surrender without putting up a fight. Soon after, a cold glint surged in his eyes. Then, his body shook violently, and countless rays of light surged on his body. At the next moment, under everyone's gazes, a set of fiery red armor automatically appeared on his body. As soon as it appeared, it emitted a ferocious might that pierced through the sky, enveloping the Spirit Ruins Patriarch within it. A huge, ferocious beast with a single horn could be vaguely seen. One-legged ox armor. The 9 Yang Sword Head's eyes narrowed as a tempestuous wave rose in his heart. I heard that there's a supreme treasure in the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven. Could it be this? In ancient times, there was a ferocious beast like an ox. It had a black body but no horns. It only had one leg. When it entered and exited the water, there would be wind and rain. Its light was like the sun and moon, its voice like thunder. It only had one horn and one leg. It was called the Kueok. And now, what the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins was wearing was almost exactly the same as the legendary Kueok. Rumor has it that the skin of the Kueox is the hardest object in the world. It's difficult for blades and swords to injure it, and it can withstand fire and water. The palace master of the Sky Palace muttered. I'd like to see how this sword can hurt me. The Patriarch of Spirit Ruins smirked coldly. Instead of retreating, he took a step forward and charged at Yi Chen. At that moment, the silhouette of a purple giant appeared behind him. The giant was hundreds of meters tall, and its appearance was solemn and dignified. The space around it was instantly destroyed. Plop! Thump! Thump! At the same time, the tens of thousands of people on the ground felt a divine might descend from the sky. All of them prostrated on the ground, and those with weaker cultivations had their bodies and souls shattered on the spot. Avatar, that's a saint's avatar! Someone almost roared out loud. The so-called martial saint was a saint among martial artists. When one reached this level, they would condense an avatar, which contained the martial artist's will toward heaven and earth. Once the avatar appeared, it would suppress everything. Oh no! The expressions of the nine-yang sword head and the sky palace master changed slightly. Then, they waved their sleeves and pushed the tens of thousands of people on the ground back 3,000 meters. This was a battle between martial saints. Just the aftershock was enough to completely shatter the entire Tianxian mountain. Boom! Then, everyone saw the saint's avatar behind the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins let out a long roar, turning the space within a radius of 3,000 meters into a world of flames. A scarlet light that looked like a heavenly fire swept through the world. It was like the wrath of a fire god. With torrential flames, it collided with Yi Chen's sword river directly. Rumble! At that moment the void was destroyed and the earth shook. Half of the entire Tianxian mountain turned into a sea of fire. Suddenly, a sword gleam appeared from the endless sea of fire and slashed at the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins like a bolt from the blue. Under this sword strike, half of the Tianxian mountain's peak was flattened. Shock flashed through the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins' eyes as well. The power of Yi Chen's sword strike was beyond his imagination. His arm shook and he retreated. Swoosh! As he retreated, a thin figure flashed past like a startled swan. A bolt of purple lightning followed the figure. The purple sword gleam tore through space and slashed at the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins under his terrified gaze. It was too fast and too powerful. There was no time to dodge at all. In the end, it slashed at the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins' chest. Rumbling sounds shook the sky, and then a miserable shriek exploded in the void. Under everyone's gazes, the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins was sent flying. The armor on his body shattered, revealing his bloody chest. It was a ghastly sight. At that moment the world was dead silent. Defeated! The Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven's Supreme Elder was defeated. How is this possible? The expressions of the nine-yang sword head and the sky palace master changed. The Patriarch of Spirit Ruins spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was extremely pale, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. There was even fear. The armor on his body was a precious treasure that he had obtained from a martial tomb. It had accompanied him for thousands of years, and he had never lost. However, it was shattered by Yi Chen's sword strike. At that moment, the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins finally panicked. Who exactly are you? However, he did not say a word. He took a step forward with the true martial thousand lightning sword in his hand and charged at the former. Then, he slashed again. Madness flashed through the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins' eyes when he saw that Spirit Ruins' avatar burn. He knew very well that Yi Chen and he would not rest until one of them died. If he did not fight with his life on the line, he might die here today. The avatar in his body began to burn, turning into a power that even the expressions of the nine-yang sword head and the rest changed as it pierced through the air. He's burning his avatar. Is he crazy? The nine-yang sword head could not help but exclaim. The avatar was the symbol of a martial saint. Once one lost the avatar, one's cultivation level would drop, and one's soul would collapse. Boom, boom, boom. The sword gleam was like a mountain as it whistled over. Burn, burn for me! The Patriarch of Spirit Ruins roared furiously. His roar merged with the power that surged out of his body and turned into a 3,000-meter-tall energy storm that whistled towards Yi Chen. Blech! Under the impact of such a terrifying storm, even Yi Chen spat a mouthful of blood and stopped in his tracks. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:26. He had underestimated the might of a martial saint, especially a saint whose cultivation system was even stronger than Earth's. He had ignited his saint form and launched a desperate attack. Seeing that his attack had succeeded, the Patriarch of Spirit Ruin's eyes flashed with deep resentment. However, before he could rejoice, he saw Yi Chen looking at him viciously. He took another step forward and slashed for the third time. Impossible! This is impossible! How could you withstand my attack? The Patriarch of Spirit Ruins roared repeatedly before saying with incomparable resentment, "Even if I die, I'll drag you to hell with me. Ah! With the life of a martial saint, I'll burn 1,000 years of my lifespan and sacrifice my soul to fight you to the death." Rumble! The void was trembling as if the starry sky was collapsing. Countless cracks appeared. Endless destructive power swept toward Yi Chen with the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins as the center. In an instant, the entire Tianxian mountain was gone, leaving behind only cracks that were riddled with holes. Blech! Under such power, even the 9-yang sword head and the Grand Purity Palace's palace master, who were far away, spat blood. It had to be said that a martial saint who had gone berserk was no less than a nuclear bomb explosion. Yi Chen turned around and hugged his daughter tightly. He used his back to resist the destructive power. Bang! His entire body was sent flying by the force, but he still held onto his daughter tightly, not letting her come into contact with any of the force. "Daddy, are you all right?" The little girl could not help but cry when she saw the blood at the corner of his mouth. "Daddy's fine." Yi Chen smiled lightly and put her down. Then, he turned around slowly and looked at the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins in the distance. "I've underestimated the martial artists of the ancient desolate realm after all. They're merely at the martial saint stage, but they can unleash the power of a soul formation stage cultivator with a desperate attack." He slowly closed his eyes and took a deep breath in. When he opened his eyes again, divine light surged in his eyes, as if he was a god looking down on the world. "Old dog, you can die with a smile on your face if you can witness this divinity of mine." With that, his eyes flashed and a faint aura of decay was emitted, as if time had awakened in his eyes. "I have a bright pearl that has been locked in the dust for a long time. Today, the dust is gone and the light shines through the mountains and rivers." Time, Yi Chen's voice was very soft, but it was clearly transmitted into everyone's mind. Every word was a gem. In that instant, the scenery between heaven and earth shook, as if time was flowing in reverse. The Patriarch of Spirit Ruins trembled. His eyes filled with struggle and confusion. It was a state of mind. It was as if one could see the marks of time at close range, and capture the aura of time. Scenes of the past appeared in his eyes. Ever since he was young and sensible, because he was the son of a concubine, he was locked in the woodshed and beaten by his father, who was the landlord. He wasn't the only one. Even the tens of thousands of people present were immersed in this state, immersed in the memories in the depths of their minds. Time passed bit by bit. The resentment on Patriarch Spirit Ruin's face gradually dissipated, and the messy aura on his body gradually weakened. He saw himself 1,000 years ago when he was only 8 years old. Because he couldn't stand the woman's beatings, he took advantage of the time when the woman was fetching water from the well at home to knock her out with a mortar and pushed her into the well. That was the first time he killed someone. Moreover, the person he killed was his father's woman. His body was trembling, and he was roaring silently. He was afraid, and he didn't want to face it. He saw the woman's corpse, which had been soaked in the well water, being fished out by the crowd. The matter of him killing someone was also exposed. Many people glared at him angrily, seeing him as a demon. They wanted to kill him on the spot, including the man's murderous gaze. He saw that at the critical moment, his biological mother risked her life to protect him, but she was beaten to death by the family servant. No. He struggled, he resisted, he didn't want to face it. In the distance, the 9-yong sword head knelt heavily on the ground. His eyes were slightly closed, and hot tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes. He saw himself bringing along his sister, whom he had picked up when he was young. The two of them lived in a dilapidated temple and depended on each other. He saw himself begging on the streets during the day, and even pickpocketing, stealing other people's belongings to support his sister. He also saw his sister being forcibly captured by human traffickers and sold to a rich family as a maid to raise their blessings. She married an old man who was about to die. He did not know how much time had passed. It felt like a breath, but it also felt like 1,000 years. Shi Qianhan knelt on one knee and tried to grab something with his hand. He muttered, "You sister," the 9-yong sword head roared hysterically. His body trembled heavily, and then he suddenly woke up. Then, he saw the Grand Purity Palace's palace master beside him lying on the ground in a disheveled state. She cried out as if she was having a nightmare, and there was a hint of lust on her face. He saw the tens of thousands of martial artists present seemed to have gone mad. Some were shouting, some were crying, and some were laughing maniacally. What kind of divinity is this? The 9-yong sword head felt a chill run down his spine. Then, he looked at Yi Chen in the distance in shock. A single divinity had caused tens of thousands of people to fall into a nightmare. Even a martial saint like him was no exception. He subconsciously looked in the direction of the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins, but the scene that entered his eyes made his scalp go numb. At that moment, the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins was sitting still. His entire body was as thin as a bag of bones. His eyes were wet with tears of blood, and his skin was as dry as tree bark. Dead. The 9-yong sword head's heart thumped wildly. The Patriarch of Spirit Ruins was dead. He had died in Yi Chen's divinity. The 9-yong sword head could not help but look at Yi Chen in fear as he thought to this point, "Fellow, does this divinity have a name?" Yi Chen carried his daughter slowly and walked toward Mu Kaiwei and the rest who were in a nightmare. He said without turning his head, "Time, time." The 9-yong sword head was shocked as he muttered to himself, "Time, what a time. Time is like a blade cutting a martial saint." He took a deep breath in and bowed to Yi Chen solemnly. He said hoarsely, "Thank you, fellow. I owe you a favor." Yi Chen's divinity was terrifying. But in the nightmare, wasn't he also re-examining the pain of his past once again? Once again, he witnessed the experience of him and his sister going from knowing each other to being separated by life and death. This matter had always been suppressed in his heart. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as an inner demon. However, by chance, under Yi Chen's divinity, the knot in his heart was untied. After that, everything was different. Even the 9-yong sword head and the rest were restrained by Yi Chen's divinity, let alone Mu Kaiwei and the rest. King Mu beat his chest and stomped his feet, unable to extricate himself. "Qinglan, hold on. You must hold on," Yi Chen sighed softly. Subsequently, he waved his sleeve and left with the few of them, leaving behind a group of people who were still immersed in the past. He had just flown halfway when he felt a sharp pain in the depths of his sea of consciousness. He could no longer hold on and fell from the sky. P.S. Chapter 4 has been updated today. Sorry for the long wait. End of this chapter.